call public meeting to order. Please stand for the sake of pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we'll be meeting with the superintendent for the public hearings of the code of conduct and the choice.
Great, thank you. I'd like to start with the code of conduct, and there's just two adjustments to the code of conduct for this year. Well, actually three. One is the Dignity Act coordinators. Names were removed, the positions are in there because every year that's something that changes. The names may change, but we have the positions in there. The second thing is the definition of weapons. It's also added. It says all knives, included but not limited to pocket knives, kitchen knives, and then there's a bunch of others that were in there, so those are the additions there. And then the last one really has to do with the different types of vaping devices and electronic cigarettes. So all of the different ones are added now, so that, and it's something that we need to refer to our code of conduct. Those electronic devices are in there. So those are the three small changes.
Any questions on the board members? All right, we'll close the public hearing on both of those items. Move on to our presentation of the district plan.
Just this, I'm sorry, so the second one, the second here, it's okay, no. So the second one was on the district-wide safety plan, the hearing, and for that, the only thing that changed in there were names. So there were no other substantive changes.
Okay, we'll move on to the district plan.
Thank you. If we could start with the health and safety plan, please. I guess I want to start with, I'm very, feel very fortunate. The number of people who have stepped up since May to work on the various committees to put us in a place where we'll have a plan to submit by Friday. I just can't thank all of those people enough for their work. A lot of hours by many, many people, our different stakeholder groups all being represented. And I just want to share really that there's been three main groups that have really worked a lot on this. One is our district safety committee, and the work of that group certainly isn't done. After the plan is in place, we'll then be doing a lot of work on the real finite details in all of our buildings when it comes to safety. The continuity of learning plan, you're going to hear from a few people tonight who have just been instrumental in making that work and putting together a plan that I think provides options for our school community. And our last one really has to do with the crisis response. And we've had some really good leadership in that area tonight, and you'll be hearing from one of our administrators tonight on that topic. So coming back to the plan itself, if you could, the next slide. This right here is from the Reopening America's Schools. It was dated July 23rd, 2020. And it says, aside from a child's home, no other setting has more influence on a child's health and well-being than their school. The in-person school environment does the following, and I won't read them all to you. But what I will say is this. We know that in-person education is where we all want to be. We want all of our students back here all of the time. As a district, we're not going to start that way with our plan, with all of our students here on September 8th. However, we are going to hopefully be able to move into that before the course of this year ends. We're going to talk about our plans tonight, but I think it's really important that everybody knows that our idea of the ideal educational setting is when all of our students are back here in their homes, away from home, at school. So that's really important to all of us. We used many documents to put together our plan, but the two that we focused on and we were expected to focus on, one was put out by the Department of Health, and there's a link here to that document. These have been on our website. They'll be on this PowerPoint, which will be on our website. The second is the New York State Education document. The first one is 23 pages long. The second one is 145 pages long, okay? Those are the guidance documents that we used to put together our reopening plan. You know, the items on this slide seem pretty simple, but they are. And I think real simple things like washing hands, disinfecting, all of those things, wearing masks, all of those things are going to keep us safe. And, you know, if you look at the last bullet, wear facial coverings, practice social distancing, except in core activities, which would be instruction, and follow proper prevention hygiene, such as washing your hands frequently, using alcohol-based hand sanitizer when soap and water are not available. Those are all very simple things. We will be able to do all of those things. We will have training for staff and students on all of those things, okay? It's one of the reasons, especially at the elementary level, that later on you're gonna hear about really a phased in approach for our reopening, okay? The next few slides just highlight all of the items that we needed to hit on to put together our plan. I am not going to talk tonight about each and every one of those items. We are going to highlight what I believe and what we believe are the most important. But all of these topics, we have to have assurances for with New York State that we're able to meet all of their expectations and guidelines, okay? So this is these are the items under people. Go ahead. These are also under people. You see cohorts, in-person instruction. There's movement and commerce. You can see all the items underneath there. Next. Then they go into places. So what do our personal protective equipment, hygiene and cleaning, disinfection, our communication plans, all of those items. Next. And then you get into the processes. And you see temperature checks, school health offices, tracing, tracking. All of those items are things that we have to address in our plan for our plan to be approved by the state. Now, note two things. Whenever I say approved by the state, there are assurances that are going to be approved by the New York State Education Department, and then the plan itself is going to be reviewed, it's my understanding, by the Department of Health. Okay, to make sure that that it meets the safety expectations. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to look at a few of these that I think are most important under health and safety. First one, the social distancing, that section is taken from the Department of Health document. It's page 10 of that 23-page document. It's right at the top of page 10 of that document. Okay. It says responsible parties must ensure that appropriate social distancing is maintained between individuals while in school facilities and on school grounds, inclusive of students, faculty, and staff, unless safety or the core activity, and you see instruction is one of those core activities, requires a shorter distance or individuals are in the same household. Now, when we talk a little bit later about what our classrooms are going to look like, the one thing I want you to keep in mind, and I'm going to give you an example with elementary, is at the elementary level, when students come back, if they're wearing masks, when they're wearing masks, they wouldn't necessarily need to be socially distanced all the time. The idea is that within that cohort, they can be closer together than those 6 feet. They can actually, in their cohort, share equipment in that cohort. because they're not going to be intermingling with other cohorts. So I need everybody to understand that coming back to school for parents out there, if you're selecting, because we're going to talk about the options, if you're selecting sending your children back, wearing a mask is part of it. If you tuned in at home or if you're watching this another time, whenever I walked around the other people who are in this room, I walked up wearing a mask. Whenever I go back to my seat, I'll put it on. Right now, I'm socially distanced from everyone, okay? The mask breaks that will happen in school will be teacher directed. And we're gonna work with all of our teachers on what that looks like. But I need everybody to understand that wearing a mask will be the rule. The exception will be when it's teacher directed and they're able to take it off, okay? Oh, I'm sorry, I think there was one more thing if you could go back there. Down at the bottom there, the last two bullets, the first one, it talks about 12 feet. 12 feet is the acceptable social distance recommendation guideline for music, for people who are singing, for aerobic exercise. So you can imagine it's going to present some challenges, right? You won't see mixed classes at the elementary level going into a gym together. We still have to figure out if a class of 12, 13, 14 elementary kids, can we get them 12 feet apart in a gymnasium? That's something we're going to work on and see how we can do that. We certainly know that in September, weather's good, we can be outside. Easy be 12 feet apart, right? But when we're in smaller areas, we're gonna have to decide, is it an aerobic activity? And if it is, then there's some things that might not be able to be done, okay? The last one there's signage. If you come into our buildings now, you will see signs up by our doors. Those signs are saying to all staff members, you can answer these questions. And when you do, if you answer them all in the affirmative, in other words, you don't have COVID, you don't have COVID symptoms, you didn't travel to an area that was a hot spot, you know, all of those things, you can come into the building. And staff members right now in our district, when they come in, they take their ID cards, and when they check themselves in, they're saying that they meet all those standards, okay? Guests, we're asking them the same questions. If they answer yes to any of those questions that they have COVID or COVID, they're not supposed to come in. They won't be allowed in, okay? We also have signage throughout our buildings about hand washing, about using hand sanitizer. All of those things are going to be in all of our rooms. They're going to be part of training for staff. They're going to be part of training for all of our students. There are some really nice short little videos that we will be expecting everybody to watch, all of our kids. Remember, this is new and different for everybody. Some kids maybe grew up with moms who hand sanitizer was the norm, right? Who hand washing was happening all the time. And in some places, maybe a little bit less. We need to make sure that all of our students receive, the right training on that. I'm going to turn it over here to Allison to talk about food service, transportation, and what am I forgetting? Oh, and facilities.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing in each of those departments in the effort to reopen schools. And for food service, number one, the process itself, we're going to put tape tape on the floors directing students which way to go into the cafeteria line so that they're not on top of each other, that they're 6 foot apart, and that they're going in one way and coming out another. We're going to reduce the number of students in the seating areas in the cafeteria. We're going to utilize additional spaces for meals like classrooms and courtyards when possible. And in the high school right now, there are microwaves in there for student use. So we're going to make sure somebody's in there to wipe things down, and the tables in those cafeterias as they're being used. We're going to prepare more grab and go items so that kids can just come in and get it and leave. There's not a lot of open food. And we're going to eliminate any self-serve So right now there's like pumps for the condiments and stuff, and we're gonna eliminate that and get all like individual packets for the condiments and silverware. Cleaning and disinfection, again, I touched on that a little bit. After each lunch period, the tables are all going to be wiped down, and the keypads on when the kids go through the lines and they enter their numbers for payment, those keypads will be wiped down after each use by the cashiers. And there's vending machines also throughout the cafeterias that are also going to be wiped down regularly. Facilities. So safety. When cleaners are cleaning, you know, for the safety of the employees, they're going to have to wear their PPE all the time when cleaning. Gloves, masks, make sure they're protecting themselves. And other facility staff are to wear PPE when appropriate. For example, in the building. So we have a lot of laborers that now work outside by themselves, mowing, you know, if they're in a truck plowing, they might not necessarily have to wear their mask because they're by themselves, but when they're in the building or around other people, they'll be required to wear their PPE equipment. Space configuration. So we're going to work with facilities to configure the spaces within the classrooms to increase social distancing. There's going to be removal of any unnecessary furniture and equipment to increase the footprint to accommodate the social distancing within the classrooms. And I think we discussed earlier today that we'll, you know, start walking through some of the classrooms individually and just kind of like Mr. Lalanich, myself, and Tom Stack, and go through and just kind of with the laborers to try to set a classroom up so we can see what it looks like. And we'll start like in the elementary level to work our way through. So it's not going to be something that's just easy, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So we'll have to look, because some of them have tables, some of them have desks. So we're going to have to look and see how we can appropriately accommodate the room for the children when they come back for social distancing purposes. Ventilation. Our ventilation systems right now are adjustable for airflow in buildings. So we're going to adjust them to allow for additional airflow in buildings. And the district will utilize the highest rated filters for the air handling units right now. I believe we are at the highest level, so we'll continue that. We'll be replaced. Right now, we currently replace those air filters 1 to 2 times a year. We're going to work on replacing them up to 3 times a year now, just to make sure that the filters are clean, and allow for open windows when able to for additional ventilation. Obviously not in the winter, but you know, when the weather is appropriate to open the windows for additional ventilation. And then signage. Sure.
Just one extra thing I want to add on ventilation. Just found this out today. Greg Phillips, who's our director of facilities, was talking with our contractors, and I think this is a really good and important point, that our systems are set up for the number of students who are usually in classes, and that's the amount of airflow that they're set for, right? We know that with the number of people who will be electing to go with the completely digital option, right? The completely at home option. There's going to be additional air, in essence, circulation for all of the students who are in there, because we're going to have fewer students in all of those rooms. So there's already going to be additional air circulation flow per student than there normally would be. And that was, I think it was a really good point brought up by some of our contractors who do that work all the time.
Okay, and again on signage, again, we'll be marking 6-foot distances in designated areas, and we're going to put up, like, keep to the right signs in the hallways so that the kids aren't passing by close to each other. Student drop off and pickup, it's going to be limited to 1 door only. However, it will be coordinated unloading. So we're probably going to have to designate a door within each of the schools for student drop off and pickup. Deliveries. Delivery personnel must wear masks. There's going to be signs at each of the doors noting that the mask is required. And again, the self-assessment, the self-health assessment. So any vendors that come to the door would have to answer those questions themselves. And if they answer yes to any of them, they won't be allowed in. Faculty and staff entrances and exits. Again, the same signage requiring daily self-health assessment. If anybody answers yes to any of those, they're not coming in. The entrances are currently and will continue to be secure once the students enter the building. The main entrance buildings will have a temperature scanner as a redundancy to home monitoring. So we're ordering temperature scanners for each of the main entrances of the buildings, each of the school buildings, that will capture groups of people coming in and notify us if someone has a temperature so that we can then address it with that individual and take them off to an isolation room or retest them to make sure that the scanner didn't pick up something else odd. But we will have that as a second backup for students and guests entering through the front doorways. And lastly, for facilities, we're going to be looking at and possibly adjusting staffing of cleaners and time working buildings so that we can appropriately cover the full school day and have enough cleaning staff and personnel on hand to, again, appropriately clean in the high traffic areas.
Could I add one?
Yep.
Just to add one thing to the cleaning, one of the things we are looking at is adding temporary cleaners at the beginning of the year, one additional in all of our buildings at the daytime. Remember, one of the other things that we're looking at is with reduced population in all of our buildings, that should reduce some of the cleaning that's normally necessary. Now we need to do additional COVID cleaning. All of our current cleaners have received COVID cleaning training. So we'll make sure that, as we bring other people on, that we can get them out there to get that kind of training as well.
Okay, and transportation, we're going to work to mitigate transmission on buses. We're going to have masks available for the drivers, for those students that enter the buses without a mask or forget their mask. The buses will be sanitized at least daily. Right now we have a machine and we have others on order. They're Clorox machines. They sanitize quickly areas with a solution that is almost, I guess it's like a steam cleaner. I'm not exactly sure, but it's something that you just kind of can quickly sanitize large areas. So we're ordering actually 2 of those per school too, to try to get some of the bigger areas done more quickly. PPE on buses, so the drivers and aides are going to wear PPE at all times when students are on the bus. And students, again, must wear face masks at all times when on the bus. There's going to be 1 person to a seat, except for family members. They can ride together in the same seat. And the questionnaire that was issued to parents about driving, approximately 50% of those parents indicated they would drive their children. So we're hoping that if that's the case, then we should have enough buses to appropriately transport the remaining students in a safe and efficient way so that we can adapt to 1 per seat.
Okay, there's quite a bit in the guidance document about processes, and you're going to hear about some of that a little bit later in one of the other presentations. But the one that I want to make sure that I touch on is the health screening and temperature checks. We will expect families to conduct a temperature check with their children every day, to do a health screening with their children, make sure their children are feeling well before they come to school. Our backup to that will be the temperature scanners that Allison spoke about, okay? We'll have them set up in each of our main entrances, and it'll be a way for us to catch if a student does get passed home with a temperature. We understand that students will come to school without a temperature and end up with a temperature at school. It happens. When we have those incidents, we'll talk about how we're going to deal with that. They'll, go down to a nurse. We'll have a separate room for them, but we'll get into those details. But understand too that with that expectation with the families, the guidance documents tells us that periodically we're going to take that as weekly. We're going to ask families to actually answer those questions in an electronic way, saying that the children have been screened, do feel well. We're probably going to do that every Monday. Okay. That's it for the health and safety. We're now going to transition into the continuity of learning.
Thank you. Here this evening with Jen Golias and Mary Sellers. Mary Sellers, Director of Special Programs. Jen Golias is our TOSA for Professional Development and all things elementary. We're going to be talking about the continuity of learning plan, the academic portion of this piece here. To preface the presentation, this presentation is really going to be in two parts. The first part, slides 1 through 11, are going to be intended to assist families in understanding and making a decision about the instructional programs with which NWCSD will begin the 2020-2021 school year. The remaining slides, 12 through 37, are intended to provide additional details about all program models for the Board of Education, for you, for families, for staff. These program models are further detailed in the official reopening plan that will be posted online by Friday. The reopening plan, this presentation, and a PDF of those first 11 slides will be posted on the district website. Also on the district website, there will be a family commitment form that all families will be asked to complete regarding the program that they select for their child. There we go. So to begin the process, the New York State Education Department requires that districts develop and post a reopening plan. A few things here. The programs and models that were developed over the course, over the past 3 months have been constructed and reduced down to a single plan using the input from teachers, from administration, from the community. We have to adhere to guidance from the CDC, the Department of Health, and New York State Education Department. We had a survey for teachers at the end of the school year, what worked, what didn't work with respect to instruction. We had a survey for families, and we've used that survey, the information from that survey for the families to inform some of the models that we developed here. In addition, of course, we had multiple continuity of learning committees that took place, 3 of them thus far, 1 more in the next month. So here are our 2 instructional programs for the upcoming school year. We're going to have a regular program, and we're going to have a virtual program. The regular program is defined above here. New York State Education Department requires that districts develop and post a reopening plan for schools whose details are aligned with the New York State Department of Health guidance, as well as the state ed guidance, of course. The program must outline 3 models for students to return. And those 3 models I'll describe. That is the regular program. The virtual program, on the other hand, Niagara Wheatfield is also developing a separate option for students whose family does not wish them to physically attend school, even if a return to school is permitted by state and local governments. This option will run for for at least half the year, and families will have the option to go in or out at 10-week intervals. That, again, is going to be called the virtual option. So we have 2 programs, the regular program and the virtual program. So let's talk about the regular program. Students in the regular program will likely transition between 3 instructional models. Those are the 3 that the state wants us to develop. They will transition between 3 instructional models as directed by state and local government. Continuity of learning will be maintained during those transitions from the perspective of a student. So the in-person model, that's where all students attend every day, following a regular schedule with safety measures in place, including the wearing of masks at all times, with the allowance of four teacher-directed mask breaks. The hybrid model is where students are going to be assigned to one of two attendance groups. The groups of students will alternate coming to school and working on learning activities from home. There's also going to be a regular remote model. This is the model where all students would participate in learning activities from home. Then we have the virtual program. The virtual program only has one model. It's virtual, it's remote. This is where all students participate in learning activities from home every day, regardless again of whether we are permitted to return to school. Keep in mind, this is a little bit in the weeds, but just so you're aware, students in the regular program are going to be scheduled separately from those in the virtual program because we have to facilitate the transitions between those models as directed by state and local government. This is a visual of what I just described of the past couple slides. So it's also up there for anybody who views this online. And for you here, you can see we start with all students. We split up into two groups. Approximately a third appear that they're going to select the virtual program. But again, that's dependent upon the formal commitment that we put out in the next couple of days. But for now, for the picture, we have about a third joining the virtual program and about 2/3 joining the regular program. And you can see that those that join the regular program are going to be split up into one of three models throughout the course of the year, depending on what we're allowed to do with respect to instruction. So here's the piece that we're going to begin with. We're going to start talking about the elementary regular program. And again, these initial slides, these initial 11 slides are designed for parents to help make a decision. So elementary regular program, Jen.
Hi, I'm going to talk about the program options that are available for families to select for their children. So the first one is the regular program model, as Jeff talked about. If the New York State governor permits children to physically return to school, the elementary students who are starting in the regular program will begin school in the in-person model following an alternating day orientation. So this would look like beginning Tuesday, September 8th, the elementary students will return to school wearing masks, and they will have an every other day orientation period, which will last through Monday, September 21st. So half of the students will attend on the even days of that time period, and half the students will attend on the odd days of that time period. We have not set the alphabet on that yet. We're still working on that, but our intention is that children of a household will be kept together no matter what level they're at. So if you have a student in the elementary, the middle, or high school, they would be attending on the same days, either even or odd. Beginning Tuesday, September 22nd, then, all the elementary school students who are in the regular program would attend school every day wearing masks. Now, as we looked at in the last picture where Jeff was showing the students and the red with the regular program, you could see that elementary students are going to start in the in-person model, but at some point in the year, they might transition to the hybrid model. They might move fluidly into the remote learning models. So the intent is, if that happens, to maintain that continuity of learning that Jeff just talked about for the students, so it's seamless as they transition between those models. And the intent is that they stay with the same teacher as they're transitioning between those, if they need to transition between those. So the second model, or second program that parents can select for their children, is the virtual program. And that virtual program, as Jeff just talked about, is separate from the regular program. And students whose families select this model will again have that same type of transition that I just talked about in orientation. And Jeff's going to go into a little bit more detail later about what's going to happen on those days. But that orientation would go until September 21st, where half the students would attend on the even days and half the students would attend on the odd days. And then beginning on Tuesday, September 22nd, these students would receive daily instructional and learning activities that will be virtual. And those learning activities are going to be both synchronous, which means they're going to have some live meetings, and asynchronous, which means that they're going to be activities that they can do at any time that's convenient for the family.
the secondary regular program. So if the New York State governor permits children to physically return to school, then the middle and high school students in the regular program will begin in the hybrid model. And this is what that would look like. Beginning Tuesday, September 8th, middle and high school students will return to school wearing masks. Students will participate in an every other day orientation period lasting through September 21st. Half the school will attend on those days given, and the other half of the school will attend on the opposite days. We will keep children of households together. Then, beginning on Tuesday, September 22nd, middle and high school students will continue to attend every other day according to the same groups. On a student's alternate day at home, they will participate in asynchronous instructional assignments provided by their teachers. Throughout the year, middle and high school students in the regular program may move fluidly between the in-person, the hybrid, or the remote learning models, as we are directed to do. And the intent, of course, is that as they do, they will stay with their scheduled teachers and maintain continuity of learning. In the secondary virtual program, these students whose families select participation in the virtual program will, beginning Tuesday, September 8th, the middle and high school virtual program students will also participate in an every other day orientation period lasting through 9/21. Half of the school, the virtual program school, so to speak, will attend on the days given, while the other half will attend on the opposite days. Again, children of households will be kept together. Then, beginning Tuesday, September 22nd, middle and high school virtual program students will continue to participate in scheduled live synchronous sessions every other day defined by their groups. On a student's alternate day, they will participate in asynchronous instructional assignments provided by their teachers. Now, those slides, again, form the basis, the core piece of information that you need to be able to make a decision about which program you'd like to select for your kids. The remaining slides, moving forward now, are going to be detail on all the models and other information as well. So let's talk about the family survey results. We put out a survey asking some information past couple weeks. Obviously, we didn't have a plan yet, but we wanted to know what were parents thinking, what were families thinking about sending their kids back or not, given masks. We also need to ask about technology. So we found that about 150 households do require the internet. About 850 students require devices at home. Transportation, we found that about 50% of students would require AM transportation, while about 60% of them would require afternoon transportation. And as for return plans, where we're getting the 1/3, 2/3 piece, we found that 66% of the students would return wearing masks. That was part of the question. And 32% of the students would participate in a virtual learning school program like what we've discussed here. So the orientation, the phased-in start, the every other day start to the year. Students in K through 12 will participate in an every other day orientation from September 8th through September 21st. There they will discuss, learn about, engage in lessons and practice and safety procedures for students, such as hand washing, taking on and off masks, social distancing, sneezing, coughing, nose blowing, what is COVID, why rules are important, lunch expectations, bus expectations, and arrival and departure procedures. Also, social emotional learning focus regarding returning to school, living in a virtual world, attendance and grading expectations, logging in to all the software, navigating Google Classroom, Clever, and so on and so forth. Assessments as well to discover regressions and learning needs. That would be taking place during the orientation period. Elementary.
Hello again. I'm going to go into deep detail now about the two program models for the elementary. But before I go into detail about them individually, I want to talk about them collectively. Because one of the things that Jeff discussed is the importance for students as we're transitioning between models that we maintain a continuity of learning. So we have some key things that are going to be similar for students, no matter whether they pick the regular program or whether they pick the virtual program. And if they pick the regular program and we're transitioning between the in-person model, the hybrid model, or the remote model, there's going to be commonalities. And we need to have those commonalities for our children to make it easy as they transition. So all programs will have teachers following the modified scope and sequence that was created last spring by the teachers. This scope and sequence was created in June, and the teachers at the grade level across the district worked together to look and think, what were some of the key things that happened after school closed? What are key standards that students might need a little bit of review on before they start with the next year content? So they've already gone through and amended the scope and sequence. So no matter what program parents pick, the teachers will still be following that same common district scope and sequence. We're also, as Jeff just discussed, during that orientation, we're going to do some assessment with some students a little bit earlier than we normally do. So we usually do a Fontes and Pinnell assessment in the fall, and we usually do a FAST assessment in the fall, but we don't usually do it within the first month of school. So we're going to do that because we really want to, we haven't seen these kids in person, or we didn't do assessments last spring. So we really need to know where kids are so that we can meet them at where they are when they're coming in. So we're going to be doing that assessment no matter what model. And then also after the initial assessments, we have our common assessments that we've created. So again, if students are in a virtual, we're able to give those same assessments that they're taking in school in the virtual model because we have a computer program that will help us to do that. And we had many teachers who piloted last spring trying to see if our FAST systems and some of our assessment systems would work at home, which those pilots were successful. So we're going to continue to do those. Each teacher will maintain an active and up-to-date Google Classroom for information and sharing. And that obviously is really important in the remote and the virtual model, but it's equally important that we do that in the in-person model or when we're doing hybrid and they're in school with us in that day. Because we had kids last time who went out who were in primary who never were in a Google Classroom, and then all of a sudden that was the way that they were learning. So it really behooves us that when we have students in front of us, we need to have our kids understand how to use Google Classroom, how to log into Clever, how to use the programs such as iRead and things that we have available. So those are going to be consistent no matter what model. Also, no matter what model, we're going to be tracking attendance daily. And we didn't do that last spring, but it will be. That was one of the things that came through on the teacher survey, and the parents on the committee were all like, we want some, we need to track attendance and make sure that kids are attending and following up if we don't have contact with kids. So that's going to happen in all the models. And then the last bullet on there is we will be using the elementary report cards, the full elementary report cards for all the models. We'll be still using our standard grading policies that we have at each grade level for elementary. We'll still be using those for all the models. All right, so that's the commonalities. So let me start with the regular program. And remember, we're defining the regular program as the in-person, the hybrid, and the remote. And this is where elementary will begin at this model. So we've kind of put the little white up there on the top to help parents really see that this is where we're going to start here. All right, so what does school look like in this model? All students will be attending every day after the phased-in start. So again, we discussed the everyday attendance starts September 22nd. We'll have reduced class size for this because 33% of the students, at least appears in our early survey with parents, will be at home. So we'll have 67% of the students that we normally do spread across all the elementary sections and our buildings, which normally house 100% of the kids. And we're also taking some teachers who are not usually assigned to a classroom. They're going to be reassigned in certain areas to reduce the class size where it's needed. Students and teachers will wear a mask all day with mask breaks that are teacher directed. Students will be kept together in cohort, and this is a big difference between the high school and the middle school where cohorting isn't really feasible. But elementary students can be kept together with their cohort. That means they're kept together with their class and they're not mixed with other students. So in order to do that, art, music, and physical education will maintain cohorting. So as Mr. Lelanich already stated, we can't mix kids into the gymnasium. So when we can go outside and have physical education, that's what we'll be doing. We might have to have it in the classroom sometime, but we need to maintain that cohorting. Also, lunches, students will be 6 feet apart, and we're going to use a cafeteria. And have them separated by cohorts in the cafeteria, and perhaps having to use the gymnasiums as well for that space, but that's something we're still working on and planning. What does learning look in this model? Well, students will follow a typical day, typical schedule of subjects like they normally do. We're going to have regular social emotional lessons because that's something that we feel is so important for our kids. And how they've been coping with this pandemic. So that you'll see as a commonality between every model. And then students will not be pulled out for this model for reading or math groups because then you're mixing kids from different cohorts. So that will no longer be something that we will be able to do. All right, so the next model is the hybrid model. And this again is not the model that we're starting in, but it could be a model that we transition to during the school year. And so for hybrid, what does that look like? Students will be assigned to an A or B group by alphabetical order, and they will attend in person every other day. Okay. Class size, because 50% will be reduced, 50% of the in-person model, and children and teachers will be wearing masks and taking breaks that are teacher directed. Students will remain with their cohort, again in this model. Art, music, and physical education will maintain cohorting. And in this model, lunch would be in the classroom. Next slide. What does student learning look like in this model? Well, we'll have some students who are in school and some students are at home on any given day, and then they would switch the next day. If they're in school, they'll follow a typical daily schedule. They will, while they're in school and face-to-face, have a regular whole class social emotional lesson. At home, students will be having synchronous activities for the day, and those activities will be posted, and they will be reading activities, math activities, writing, phonics, word study, and then we're going to alternate social studies and science. And students, we're going to take attendance. So on those days when they're at home, if they complete a learning activity, that will count as having attended school for that day. So the last option of the regular program is the remote. And again, this is not where elementary is going to start, but it could be something that they transition to during the school year. What does this look like? Well, this is learning at home every day. Because we want to maintain that continuity of learning, our hope is that they will have the same teacher and students they had when they were in-person learning. Students will be marked present, in this case, if he or she completes a learning activity or if he or she attends a synchronous meeting, because in the remote model, we will have live synchronous meetings. So learning looks like a consistent daily schedule. That was something that came through from our teacher surveys. It also came through from our parents on our continuity of learning committee, a consistent daily schedule. Parts of the day are going to be live and synchronous, and then parts of the day will be asynchronous, where students complete posted activities and do that on a time that's convenient for them or their family. We'll have multiple daily virtual whole class synchronous meetings that serve as check-ins or lessons over the course of the schedule. The schedule will include lessons in practice and support for same subjects, reading, writing, math, social studies or science, which alternates, phonics and word study. We will have asynchronous curriculum extension, which is art, music, and physical education. And then there'll be some synchronous meetings where they actually meet live with a CE teacher. We'll have regular whole class social emotional lessons. And this is a little bit different than last year, but there's no paper packets. So last year, we had paper packets and everyone came and picked those up. With the remote model now, there will not be a big paper packet pickup. But accommodations will be made for those students who don't have technology, where we will work something out there. Okay, next. Okay, so those three that I just went over are the regular program. So now this is the virtual program, and this will be separate for families who have selected the virtual program. This program will run for at least the first half of the school year. And what does this look like? Well, it's also learning at home every day. what we're going to do in order to keep the staff consistent that we already have in our elementary buildings is we're going to add 2 sections at each grade level. And these sections are going to be district-wide sections. So there's students, there could be students in the class from all the different elementary buildings, from all 4 elementary buildings. And some of our teachers that are not typically assigned to a classroom will be reassigned. And this will allow for the creation of this section, these sections. That doesn't mean that those teachers are doing those sections, but we're just going to reassign and spread out and adjust. And so we're adding 12 sections of elementary, but not adding any staff. What does the student learning look like? Students will follow a consistent schedule where parts of the day are synchronous and parts of the day are asynchronous. And this is very, very similar to the remote, so I'm not going to go over it in every bullet, but there's going to be synchronous learning. They'll follow a schedule. There'll be asynchronous learning, same subjects as in the remote model. Still a focus on social emotional learning. They're still going to get curriculum extension. And again, still no paper packets involved with this model.
Thank you. All right, middle and high school. So the middle and high school are going to begin in the hybrid model. What does school look like for these kiddos? Students will be assigned to one of 2 attendance groups by alphabetical order. Classes will run on an alternating day schedule like we've discussed, AB, AB, AB. Students will attend school in person on their group day and participate in asynchronous learning activities at home on the alternating day. Masks will be worn at all times, although teacher-directed mask breaks will be permitted. Class sizes will be about half as normal, minus those attending the separate virtual program. Lunch will be spread out to achieve physical distancing while students remove their masks to eat, and additional lunch periods may be created if necessary. Larger classes, including PE, music, band course, they'll have to spread out and make accommodations for physical exertion. And attendance will be taken as normal when students are on campus, and attendance will be taken via daily completed check-ins or assignments for those at home. What does student learning look like here? Essentially, this is an 80-minute block schedule. It includes content delivery and student practice spread out over 2 days, 40 minutes on an A day and 40 minutes on a B day. Now, some teachers may choose to develop content delivery videos or slideshows for students to view at home while engaging classroom discussion and practice when they're on campus, while other teachers may choose to engage in the content delivery in person with practice in small group while the student is at home. And still others will probably do some sort of a blend of these 2 approaches. Each teacher will maintain an active and up-to-date Google Classroom for information and material sharing. Assessment and grading will ensure equity for each assessment. Each individual quiz will be completed either at home or at school, open book or closed book, and so forth. Teachers will likely employ a variety of assessment techniques throughout the school year for students to demonstrate their understanding and to earn grades. And as Jen mentioned, no paper packets. Accommodations will be made for students with no technology. Remote. This is the model where middle and high school students could transition to this during the school year. So what does this look like? All students are home every day. Students are assigned still to one of 2 attendance groups by alphabetical order. It'd be the same groups as before. Classes will run on an alternating day schedule, still AB, AB, AB. Students will participate in synchronous learning activities on their group day and participate in asynchronous learning activities at home on the alternate day. So essentially like hybrid, except they're at home participating in a scheduled live synchronous activity with their teacher during their class period. Class sizes will be about half as normal, minus those attending the virtual program. Performance-based classes, including phys ed, band course, and art, they'll have to make some curricular accommodations for students to engage remotely. And attendance will be taken via daily completed check-ins or assignments. Now, student learning. Essentially, this is still an 80-minute block schedule, including content delivery and student practice spread out over 2 days, 40 minutes on one day, 40 minutes on the next day. Most teachers will likely follow an instructional pattern similar to the hybrid model, because this is likely what we would transition from, facilitating a transition to or from a remote model. One group of students will engage in synchronous activities on one day, while the other engages in asynchronous activities, and the next day they switch. Each teacher will maintain an active and up-to-date Google Classroom for information material sharing. Assessment and grading will ensure equity for each assessment, so each individual quiz will also be completed either at home or in school, open book or closed book, etc. Teachers, again, will likely employ a variety of strategies to assess their students and earn grades. And again, no paper packets. Accommodations will be made for students without technology. Okay, in person. This is a third model that we could transition to at some point during the year. So in the in-person model, what does school look like? Well, this is where all students attend school in person every day, according to the regular master schedule. Masks will be worn at all times, although teacher-directed mask breaks will be permitted. Class sizes will be relatively normal, minus those attending the separate virtual program. Lunch will be spread out to achieve physical distancing while students remove their masks to eat, and additional lunch periods would have to be created. Larger classes, including PE, band, chorus, they'll have to spread out as well to make accommodations for the physical exertion, and attendance would be taken as normal in this situation. Now, as for student learning, each teacher would still maintain an active and up-to-date Google Classroom for information and material sharing. That's important. We have to make sure that we can transition and maintain continuity of learning between the models. Instruction, assessment, and grading would likely be similar to normal operations, with the exception that there would naturally be an increase in some work being completed online. Okay, so the virtual program. Now, those 3 slides were about the regular program, the 3 models of instruction within the regular program. This is the virtual program. This program will run for at least the first half of the year. What does this school look like here? So this model will run in parallel to the regular education program. It will be scheduled separately, and the students will not cross over between the 2 programs. School itself, however, will look pretty much the same as the regular program's remote learning model, which was described in the last 2 slides ago. And as for what student learning would look like, it too, student learning would look the same as that in the regular program remote learning model. Pre-K, Jen.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the pre-K program at Bunny Bunch. The pre-K program at Bunny Bunch is also required to have an in-person, a hybrid, and a remote return plan. These plans must follow the NYSED guidelines for schools, not the Department of Health guidelines for daycares. And this is really important for us to understand, because the Department of Health guidelines for daycares allows an organization like Bunny Bunch to operate a day camp or a pre-K program with students who are not kindergarten age, without masks. Just the teachers have to wear masks. Because Bunny Bunch is affiliated with Niagara Wheatfield and is operating our Niagara Wheatfield program, we in Bunny Bunch have to follow the New York State education guidelines. And the New York State education guidelines say that masks are required for students and staff. So this is something that we really have to work with educating people about, because a parent can walk into Bunny Bunch and they can see Bunny Bunch's pre-K program. Bunny Bunch's pre-K program could have students without masks. Our program, the students have to have masks because we fall under 2 different guidelines. Guidelines for daycare, no masks. We have to fall under the guidelines for NYSED, and those are masks. So masks will be required for all students and staff in our Bunny Bunch daycare program. Our pre-K program, sorry. Right now, we're in the process of surveying families. As families are coming in and we're screening now the students, they're filling out a questionnaire. So we're waiting for that data to decide which model we're going to start with. We're also waiting for some clarification from the Department of Early Learning as well. And so once we know that, we will make a decision about what model our pre-K program will be starting. But just like we were for our K-12 program, we do intend to offer a virtual program for our families, a fully virtual program. Right. So I can tell you a little bit about what the models look like for pre-K. So the pre-K in-person model will be full day, 5 hours a day, scheduled like they normally have in our pre-K program, but wearing masks. Many safety measures that Bunny Bunch has put in, and we have a program. We have also a plan for all the safety guidance such that Dan and Allison were outlining, also for our Bunny Bunch program. For the hybrid model, students would be attending every other day at the center, and then they would have learning activities for at home. So the next day, they would learn at home, and then the next day, so alternating days. So because the New York State Education Department guidelines really want to reduce screen time for our pre-K program, students at the end of the day, when they were in school, would take home a schedule, and they take home materials and activities to do at home the following day. Then when they come back to the center, they would return anything they would need to, and then they would have their learning all day, and then they would take home for the next group. So we would have half the kids at the center at one day and half the kids at home, and then they would switch. That's the hybrid model. The remote model, also what the virtual program will look like, that students will follow a consistent daily schedule where parts of the day are synchronous and parts of the day are asynchronous. And Bunny Bunch is planning to have a teacher in the classroom and actually, videotaping, and she'll be in an empty room, but she'll be interacting with the kids, doing lessons, singing songs, doing poems, doing phonemic awareness activities, and then the students might go off and do something at home. And then they might come back on a little while, have another lesson, have another little share and check-in, and then they would do something else. So over the course of the day, they'll have multiple synchronous meetings live with the teacher, and then they'll also have asynchronous activities.
Good evening. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some highlights of our special programs. We are committed to providing students who have individualized education plans for free and appropriate education, free and appropriate public education. When students return to school, when the school year starts, we will have Cse meetings, and we will address any learning gaps that the students have. So the students will have assessments when they come back to school, and then we'll have meetings and we'll look at these learning gaps to determine whether or not we need to provide any additional services for the students or anything to close those gaps. So psychologists will continue to evaluate students for services, and they will adhere to safety guidelines. If the services are remote, if students are receiving services that are not in person, some evaluations can be conducted remotely, but there are some that will not be able to be conducted. The portions of the evaluations, or some of the evaluations that cannot be conducted remotely, we will work with the families to arrange testing when the students return as soon as possible. So in-person instruction. Teachers and aides will be wearing face coverings at all times when working with students who are unable to wear face coverings for medical or programmatic reasons. Some teachers and related service providers may need transparent face coverings, so we're looking at ordering some for them to actually be able to see their face when they're conducting speech therapy or other therapies or reading instruction. The students will be provided instruction regarding the new classroom procedures and expectations. So our students, it may look a little bit different. We may look at the physical spaces being mapped out, and there might be some more explicit instruction for our students so that they can understand the expectations and be able to follow them in the classroom. related services will be provided to students in instructional models while staying physically distant. So students who receive any related services, speech, OT, PT, we're going to try to do as much push in as we can. So we're going to have the therapist try to go into the classrooms and work with the students. And if they require some pull-out services, we're going to try to stay in the cohorts to the maximum extent possible. So we're trying not to mix the cohorts even in the small group settings for those services. So for the hybrid instruction, so in addition to in-person learning, students will participate in the same type of instruction as was described. So they'll be in person, and then they'll also get some online learning and practice activities with Google Classroom and other platforms. So although if a hybrid model is implemented, so at any time if we're allowed to come in person and the district decides that at any of the levels that they will have a hybrid model, the students who receive services in the self-contained 12-1 classes will attend every day. So that's something different. They'll be able to come in every day. They will not do the virtual model if we are hybrid. So they will follow the established guidelines of the district and will in the in-person protocols. All right, so the remote or virtual program, the programming will include consultation, accommodations, modifications, collaboration with teachers, and remote instruction with a special education teacher. The consultation will occur between the special ed teachers and the general ed teacher team members for the students. And a student with a 504 plan will continue to be supported by the classroom teachers and case managers through ongoing collaboration with parents, teachers, and students. Remote related services, including teletherapy for speech, OT, physical therapy, and counseling will be provided. So students will still receive their services virtually. Technology will be embedded. Accessibility features will be used. So we'll be able to use some features through the computer that will help students access opportunities and continue their learning activities.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Jen. Before we get to this last slide about next steps, I want to also make sure I say thanks again to the parents and to the teachers who joined the administration on the Continuity of Learning Committee meetings this past month. Also, one other person, Jessica Smith, our technology coordinator, was instrumental in getting nearly 500 or 600 children devices, Chromebooks, loans of Chromebooks during the spring who needed them. She was also behind getting loans of about 100 hotspots for the internet access for 100 of our families who didn't have internet access. She played an integral role, Jessica Smith did, in the technology components of this plan. So our next steps, obviously, presentation to you this evening. Following this evening, we are posting online in submission to SED the plan. We will be posting this presentation, the initial 11 slides like I referenced. We will be posting the full detailed plan. This week we'll also be posting a parent commitment form, which will be due next Wednesday, August 5th. Next Monday and Tuesday, August 3rd and 4th, we'll be having a program/model, an instructional program/model question and answer for parents. It'll be a virtual Zoom session. Next week, we'll of course await further guidance from New York State, and the remainder of August will be using the parent commitment form results to inform the development of our final student schedules. And then one last meeting for the Continuity of Learning Committee on August 24th. The last scheduled meeting. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks to the Board of Education for allowing me to be here to present tonight on behalf of the Crisis Pandemic Planning Team. We had 3 meetings. Yesterday was our 4th, and those meetings were consistent of myself, Dr. Pat Phelan, Mrs. Barbara Leduca, as well as Miss Heidi Dashnaw in our office. And yesterday we were happy to have the company of NWTA representation, the NWTA nurses representation, the NWSRP, as well as our food service personnel manager and our transportation manager. So that was fantastic for us to move through this exercise. And really our charge and our purpose is, as you can see, to provide directions for our families, our staff, and our students on how we plan for, then exercise a crisis response for our entire school community. Secondly, we want to take into account all the stakeholder groups, some of those of which I mentioned, on interpreting the federal, the state, the local health and education guidance to guide all of our decisions and all of our practices, protocols, and procedures. We are again, another charge, review written policy, practice, procedure to help shape pandemic planning on the physical and the human resources aspect of our school district. Some of this has been covered a little bit by Superintendent Lalanich, as well as Ms. Davis in her presentation. So it's not redundant in totality, but it's important to know that appropriate screening protocols are certainly part of our plan. Those were very well outlined on pages 18, 19, and 20 of the New York State Department of Health interim guidance document that I know is in front of you. It's also in the written plan that our board members have, which is 13 pages from me. Parents will be screening their children prior to school and reporting this to the school. Of course, the on-site screening is something that we will provide for those not screened at home. That's another process and procedure that we will have. I know Superintendent Lalanich talked a little bit about screening, periodic screening of students themselves. We're looking at doing that once weekly. Certainly that would be part of it. I think our challenge is, and one of the things that we are continuing to work through is, how do we collect that information? How do we gather the information? And right now we're looking at a few platforms that would allow us and enable us to keep appropriate records and ensure that we're following all the outlined procedures. Some of those things, examples would be surveying of parents, health information, and integration. So those are just a couple additional pieces on our screening protocols. Moving into hygiene protocols, these are also very well outlined in the Department of Health guidance. But to speak for our planning purposes and crisis pandemic planning, we're looking at 400 to 500 new units, wall-mounted units, I should say, with also standing discharge stations for hand sanitizers. They will be deployed in and throughout our buildings, especially those high-touch areas will be those areas of focus for us, as previously noted. Mr. Phillips and his crew are going to work very, very closely with the building principals to help work on locations for those and designate those areas. My department's purpose is going to be, again, on instructing students, instructing staff on appropriate hygiene protocols and what that looks like. That will all be something that we will have to certainly train our staff on, as well as the students in the opening few days of school, those staff development days, as well as when we bring our students back. Again, hygiene protocols continued. We have to take a really hard look at and still plan for, potentially the soiled PPE, garments, paper towels, and having an appropriate disposal schedule, along with a regular cleaning schedule that is set for school-wide cleaning efforts. Special consideration obviously has to be given to those high-touch areas, as I stated, restroom facilities, disposal of materials from the decon room or otherwise the isolation room that each school will have. The isolation or decon rooms will be designated in each school. They will have a designated area and space that will be used by a nurse and other school personnel to staff it appropriately until a student could be transferred home and or to an appropriate medical service provider at that time. Schools, obviously, we're going to have a very strong obligation to maintain the privacy of the individual being treated, and that's important to note, but we'll also work very, very closely with our county DOH with each suspected and potentially therefore positive case if we feel it need be. When a student presents symptoms, suspected and confirmed cases, we have developed a flow chart which accompanies my document, and I'll get into that in a few minutes, but the flow chart in the presentation outlined in your packet as well is going to help guide our communication and our procedures. We're going to work to communicate with the health department, as I previously stated, as they've already reviewed our plan and they helped vet this document that's in front of you, which I think was very helpful. So a special thanks to Lori Schoenfeld at the Niagara County Department of Health. She worked really hard with us on this. Obviously, we're going to have to look at, this was already noted, but we'll continue to work at our increased air circulation in our classrooms in an infected area or a suspected infected area, and also our cleaning of that area, whether it's waiting 24 hours to clean the entire area and with what designated products we would use by the DEC. There's two flow charts that I provided you, the management of ill persons and COVID-19. And on the left-hand side, you'll see students are designated. On the right-hand side, you'll see that staff and other staff are noted on the right-hand side. So this flow chart was really built in conjunction with Orleans Niagara BOCES safety risk. Leon was fantastic in helping us with this. It was also vetted through, as I stated, the Niagara County Department of Health, as well as the Orleans BOCES School Physicians Association. So this is a document that's really going to help shape and cultivate some of our decisions and our protocol and procedure as we move through the crisis. This is a continuation. This is the page 2 of the flow chart, so it's worth taking a good look at to help us kind of isolate particular situations and look at things on a case-by-case basis as we move through. And then lastly, I outlined several bullets for a return to school after COVID-19. And this is going to be, how do we appropriately bring students back to school? How do we appropriately bring staff members back to school? And how do we adequately provide for the safety of all of the other persons in the buildings as we continue to bring students back? That also is from the Department of Health guidance. Thank you. If we could open the questions for anybody.
Okay, before opening up to questions, just one thing that I do want to note, particularly when it comes to the completely virtual option at the secondary level. As we set up classes, there may be classes that will be offered to people who are selecting the in-person program, right? The regular program. That will not be offered if you select the completely virtual. We just may not have that many singletons to offer. So I just want to make sure that that's really clear as parents make these, make these choices. So why don't we do this? We had 3 different presentations. One was on health and safety. One was on continuity of learning. And then the last one was on our emergency response. Maybe we start with questions that are just health and safety, then we'll move into the more that are connected to curriculum instruction and the learning models, and then we'll end with the ones that have to do with the crisis response.
All right, my first question is dealing with the ventilation. Just out of curiosity, I know it said that that the district will utilize the highest rated filters appropriate for air handling units. What is the highest rating that our units can handle?
It depends on the actual unit. So some of the units can handle higher rated filters than others before they would start to shut down. And so if you're using too high rated of a filter on a particular air handling unit, it will clog up and you won't get the airflow that we also need to have, right? So each unit will be different with regard to what its highest recommended filter is. We have, as I think most people know, the air handling units in this district are all different ages, all different shapes, all different sizes. So we'll use the highest recommended rated filters.
So are they going to be, are the filters going to be appropriate for filtering COVID out, or is it, do we not get high enough up to them be able to filter out that level of micron?
So the minimum rating for this is, I think it's 7.8, and I wish our facilities director was here, but this is the best I know, and Allison maybe not, but I believe it's called 7.8 rating, and that is the minimum requirement, and none of our air handling units will take anything less than that. In other words, we'll have at least that 7.8 rating for all of our filters. What else? What else? Just health and safety.
So we won't be doing any changes to the ventilation system other than the filter, right?
That's correct. So, and we would expect is that prior to the start of school, all of our filters will be changed the first time before the school year starts. And then we'll do it at least 2 other times during the school year.
In dealing with air filtration and air movement in the classroom and everything, and then we have mask breaks and everything, we know what the temperature of classrooms are like returning back in September. Are fans allowed by the health department and stuff to still continue to be used in the classroom, especially during mask breaks when, what the masks are trying to stop doing is circulating, air particles.
Sure. Great question. There was nothing in the guidance document about fans. Again, I think the idea that more airflow is better, the fact that you can have windows open, which of course would in essence be kind of a one-directional airflow, and they're pushing that. I can't imagine that fans wouldn't be acceptable, but it's a good question. I think it's one we'll need an answer to.
I think, the key focus on that is when during the mask breaks.
Sure.
Because obviously with the mask, you're going to be in wind anyways.
Correct.
In a classroom with windows.
It's a great
open.
question.
But when that mask breaks, it sort of seems to me defeating the purpose of.
It is one we did not come across, so it's a good one.
Anyone else with questions on the portion of health and safety?
I get on the food service. It does say utilize spaces in classrooms, courtyard, etc. Are we looking at certain groups?
Can I I'm just sorry, just make sure, and I don't know if you are, make sure we,
Yeah. Okay.
thank you.
As far as the food service, it says utilize additional spaces for meals, as in your classrooms, courtyard, etc. Is that certain age groups we're looking at, or how's that play out?
Yes, likely. In other words, the younger ones will probably be more likely that we'll keep in the cafeteria. All of where we are will be predicated on how many people we have and where we have to go to be more creative, so that when they take their masks off to eat, they can make sure that they can have that 6 feet in between them. Okay, so
They all will be going to get their lunch. Is that what it is, or how's that?
we believe that that's the case. Correct. We have taught, I will tell you this, those are some of those details now that as we have our plan together, we'll have to work out by building. But, is there a possibility that meals could be taken? Yes, I think that that's not likely though. Yeah.
With the teachers and mask breaks.
Good question. I think it'll be a lot less to begin with. How about that? Quite frankly, there's going to be for everybody. There's going to be, and that's why we built in this phase-in approach, a getting used to period. The rule will be the mask though. So in smaller class sizes where they're doing work at seats, could there be longer breaks? Absolutely. But again, the rule is the mask, and it will. No, the teacher wouldn't. Correct. If they're walking over helping kids, exactly. Yes. If they have their social distanced, could they not have a mask on for a little bit? Sure. Would they get a break as well? Yeah. But one of the other things, our classrooms will be created so that everybody's kind of facing in the same direction. So if teacher takes the mask off, they'll probably be off to the side. It would be when they're not right in front having a conversation with a kid who's close to them.
I mean, is it conceivable that some classes would be small enough where everyone would be at least 6 feet away?
Where they wouldn't be wearing a mask at all? No. No. The rule is mask. Remember, that as I did whenever I got up here and I walk around the room, I put my mask on because I'm walking closer than 6 feet. The kid who has to get up and sharpen a pencil, kid who goes up to grab, a piece of paper, kid who gets up to go to the bathroom. The rule is the mask, and the teacher will direct those breaks.
All right, so just the dynamics of the building and moving around. I have to ask this because I didn't see the plan is, what about bathroom breaks? Sending kids to the bathroom. You could have, Johnny from class A, Bob from class B, someone else from class C. I'll have to go same time, not knowing, different classes and everything. They all end up in there. Now you're starting to get 5, 6, 7 people in the bathroom at a time, possibly, different classes. What's the plan?
But believe it or not, we did talk about that, even into that minutia. We haven't finalized that plan yet, but what I would say, that's where it gets back to the mask, right? So everybody's wearing a mask when they're in any common areas, when they're any place like that. So if they do, by chance, come within 6 feet of somebody, they have a mask on when they do it.
So when the parents and students decide to log into their program that they participate in, is there any chance of switching? So say somebody wants to come on campus and do that, and after the first few days, you're like, heck with all this, let me just do virtual with that.
Great question. 10 weeks. So when people lock in, they're locking in for 10 weeks. We can't build these schedules and then have them change overnight. Good question.
I do have a question on similar to that. The regular program, right,
Mhm.
has 3 different models in it. How is that triggered?
Great question. So let's take the elementary, for example, right? We're going to start at the beginning of the year really in a every other day, and then by September 22nd, we'll be every day at the elementary. If on October 1st, cases in our what's called our region reach over 9%, schools would be forced to change. Would that be completely closed down and completely virtual? Likely, is from what we've heard from the governor's office at this time. Could it be that it's a reduction? Possible. So we could be in a place where we are at 100% of the kids who are planning to coming. And then they could say, you need to move into some hybrid. That's possible. What I think is more likely is that when we reach a particular number of people who are COVID positive in our region, schools will close. And then then that group that was in person, considered in person every day, would be transitioning to being remote. Still staying with their group, all the other things that were explained. But that's the trigger.
That'll be triggered basically from either the state or local here.
Correct. Now, could we see, let's use our high school now as an example, our high school, middle school. They're every other day to start. So they're really in they're starting in a hybrid. If we found that cases were really going down, if the vaccine comes in and our cases are solo, could we look at switching out of that model mid-year? Perhaps. Would we change that up before that? Probably not, because of the work that it would take to make that happen. I would imagine that our secondary program would stay like that unless vaccination or something like that, or the governor says you got to close up shop. What else?
Anything else for
Health and safety.
health and safety? Yes.
On transportation, sanitizing the buses, what is the turnaround time? If we're fortunate enough to have all sports and we need bus kids, if we use a PM run, getting that bus back to take athletes somewhere, what would be the turnaround time to sanitize that bus, get it back on the road?
I would say, it depends on how many buses we have going out, right? But, to spray down a bus, that can happen. The question is how many and how busy and how, likely. So that's going to be a challenge, certainly. Well, could we perhaps, utilize at that point, at the end of the day, some of the extra spray devices that we have that are in our secondary campus, middle school, high school, and move them over? Certainly. But again, how many buses do we have going out on a given day? You'd actually probably know the answer to that better than I for athletics. But if it's 2-3 buses, I think we'd be able to manage that. I'm sorry?
Same with getting students.
Same thing with BOCES. Yeah, those are part of the normal runs. Good question.
Anything else for?
What else?
Anything else for health and safety? All right, let's move on to continuity of learning.
Okay. I'll stay here and then call you up, okay? All right.
All right, first thing I have is obviously a semantic piece with, things I know parents were asking with communication. We use Google Classroom and so on. Are teachers going to be allowed to still use things like Remind and stuff for parent communication pieces where they've used them in the past?
Yes, they can use
Oh,
Remind.
I'll just step right here. You're okay.
So, yes, they can certainly continue to use Remind, specifically because Remind is actually licensed, or we have a contract with Remind. So that is an approved use, as is Google Classroom for sure.
Yeah, the concern was that a lot of parents say, I don't check my email all day long if there's like a message that needs to come out from teachers or someone from the school and everything. And if a teacher usually sends me a reminder, it just goes to a text message to my phone. So
Yeah.
they're more apt to get that.
And that's
But
one
they
of
were
the,
just concerned.
and that's actually why we moved to that. We recognize the fact that that's how people communicate. So yeah, Remind, absolutely.
Okay. Just a quick question, can you, and I know this is going to pop up as a question from parents, the difference between the remote and virtual programs.
Okay, here you go. So if you were a student in one of them, you're not going to see a difference. But structurally, because that's what we're talking about, is developing the structure for the big picture model here. The difference then structurally is this. If a parent has decided they don't want their child to attend school physically at all, even if we're allowed to do so, that child would be enrolled in the virtual program. And that virtual program will meet like I discussed at home. It'll be all remote, Google Classroom, every other day, synchronous, asynchronous. On the other hand, if a family says, you know what, I'm okay if my child goes to school if we're allowed, and I also understand that if we're not allowed to go to school, my child won't be there, my child will be at home. That child will be enrolled in the regular program. And if we're allowed to be in school, then that child will be either here every day or here every other day. And if they say, nope, everybody's home now, then that child would be in the remote program, separate from the virtual program, separate schedule, separate teacher scheduling. From a kid's perspective, they probably really wouldn't see the difference, except for the fact that the kids in the virtual program are never going to be physically on campus unless the parent changes their mind. And the kids in the remote program could actually come back on campus as soon as the government says, yeah, you guys can go back now. That's really what the difference is.
Just in the elementary, there'll be a little bit of difference because the elementary class will be, the virtual class will be mixed students from all different elementary schools, and the teacher might be, pulled from the different elementary schools as well. So if they're in the remote program because they've chosen the regular program and they've transitioned to that, they'll still be with their teacher from the same school and the students from the same school. So there's a little bit of a difference to that in the elementary level.
Because I could see the three things being confused because two things are already confused. Is that what is homeschooling, and virtual learning is not homeschooling. They have to understand that. That's, I want the board to have me tell you, I'm sure you understand too. Homeschooling is you sign a letter saying, hey, you're doing all the instruction. The school's not providing any of this component whatsoever to you. Virtual is, your kid could normally be coming to school, but you chose not to, and we're going to take advantage of the virtual piece of that. And then the remote is, should we ever have to not be here? So, I could just see parents interchanging that homeschooling for those other components now.
It can't be said enough, and I think you just said it perfectly. So to Jeff, if you think of virtual as the option where you're planning not to come to school as long as we're offering the virtual option, which is at least for the first semester, you won't be here at all no matter what. The other three pieces are part of our regular program, okay? The other three pieces, the hybrid, the in-person, and the remote. Those are all part of our regular program, and where we are in that program will be determined by COVID.
All right, so then the next question would be virtual learning. So if I choose to have my child be home for virtual learning, are they allowed to come and play sports with the school if the sports are going on?
Great question. We'll get you an answer.
I could just see the argument piece of like.
Yeah, I personally would have a hard time with it. And I would say the same thing with going to career technical ed, right? If the choice, because let's face it, if the district chose, which we're not, but if we chose to have people enter a virtual program through HHI, which is home hospital instruction, those things would not be an option. We're not making it that difficult for families who are interested in that program. But what they're saying is, I don't want to be here to be part of the program because of the events that are going on. And so we'll get an answer for that at our, soon. But we didn't really get into any detail about.
Because I mean, you're right about attending the vocational center also.
Yeah, correct. I think those are two good question pieces to this. I guess.
Tangential, and somebody reached out to me last week because the state vaccine out to the homeschool and virtual options and that they would homeschool.
Got it.
Would they have an option to try the virtual option that we have? Still not following vaccine.
Well, so I think your question is this: as long as we're offering the virtual option, is it open to everyone who is in? Oh, well, no, wait. The way you just said that, you have to be a registered student. So if someone who's homeschooled is not registered, and you have to have the vaccinations to be in the program, is that what you were asking? To be part of any of our programs, you would have to be. You can't be in the virtual program if you don't have the vaccines because you're not considered a registered student. Correct. That's correct. Yep. That was it's a good question because it was a question that was brought up and we did get an answer back on. So that's a good one.
If we decide someone who's at home virtual, we at least let them know that you might not be able to get involved in sports or BOCES if you choose this way. I agree. If they don't want to come to school, then it's kind of defeating why they're not wanting to come to school in the first place. So
we'll give an answer to that. I mean, I think it's a really good question. So we'll get an answer.
Yeah, I mean, that was just should be as flexible as possible. So much, people make decisions for different reasons.
Sure.
I had a lot of you guys were looking over the 145 page deck, saying, social sort of guys around us.
And that was an exciting read.
Yeah.
I just want to ask about the virtual.
Yeah.
If they decide to go virtual, they are basically locking themselves into a period of time.
So if you choose virtual, you're saying that if you choose either one of these programs, we're saying you're selecting that for 10 weeks. At probably about 7 weeks, we haven't set a date yet, but at about 7 weeks, we'll send something out and say, what do you want to do for the next 10?
And that would count virtual as well.
Then, right? Yeah, you're making a selection really to be in the regular program or to be in the virtual program. And you're doing that by 10 weeks. Okay? Because, and of course, I think people get, reason being, we're creating huge schedules that we need to make sure people fit into.
Has there been any discussions of, I'm not even sure it's feasible, but, we did the virtual learning in the fourth quarter. There might be some lapses with the students. In this orientation period, is there any plans or discussions to catch some kids up? Right? You would think maybe like in the mathematics or something.
Absolutely. And that was, I think it was on there. I know there was a ton, but one of the things that they are going to do, we're going to do earlier assessment, and that earlier assessment is going to be to catch regression. So if students have slipped back, if they've fallen back, we'll know where they're at, so we can meet them. And they, at the end of this past year, some work was done with where they are in the scope and sequence. So we'll be starting back a little bit, doing more review to catch kids up a little bit.
Thank you.
So there's what we're doing for the general population and then what we're doing for the individual students. You're welcome.
And, John, go ahead.
Yeah, with the orientation for the virtual students for the elementary and secondary,
Okay.
they've got the two groups. How are they doing the orientation? Is it virtual orientation or are they coming into the building?
Okay, so you're talking about from September 8th to September 21st.
Correct.
That
Every other day.
that's every other day they're going to be in school. So everybody who chooses, so everyone who chooses the regular.
Yes, for virtual.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Students that are,
So that'll be synchronous learning. So it'll be online classroom, me talking to you in a virtual way.
okay. Didn't specify on there. So I was wondering.
Okay. Yep,
Families
good
per
question.
se.
And thank you for catching the way
So-
that question was asked. Thank you.
So I mean, they're gonna go through all the this is the hand washing, mask wearing and everything for those days.
No, it'll just mean that there'll be every other day.
But for
For the kids that are virtual, they won't get as much of the hand washing. They'll get remember, it's going to be run separately as
Okay, so
almost like a
their
separate school.
curriculum will be-
They'll have
will be
different.
governed by the time that they don't need to be here for that particular
Correct.
piece.
That's right.
All right.
Correct. Yep. What else?
Let's go with, and we talk about students coming back, teachers coming back with this. Planning time, just the amount of time in the classroom, and I can see a lot of the procedures eating up a lot more of instructional time, especially the first 10 weeks. Are we allotting more planning time or more building that in as much as possible where they're
Good question. We're lucky, I think, that the way we planned, at least the beginning of this year, that we had 3 days to begin with. So 3 of our 4 superintendent's conference days are before the school year starts, and we have a 4th. NISCUS, I believe, NICET, a number of groups are pushing for the possibility of 2 additional days. I don't know if I'd want them the first couple days, if they're approved. So right now, as maybe most know, we're only allowed to have 4 superintendent's conference days that count. Okay. If we were able to add 2, my feeling would be we would do it right after we do our phase-in. So we could then take a breath, say, what are we doing? What are we doing right? What do we need some more time on? And we would maybe use those days that way. I could see us doing something like that. Remember, let's use the elementary. At the elementary, the in-person, they're doing things pretty much exactly the same way, except we're cutting the population in half for those first 10 days. So kids can do a lot of things, but including getting them ready for the virtual classroom if we're forced to go in that direction. At the secondary level, secondary kids are much more, able themselves to work in a virtual world, right? So for our teachers, in those first 10 days at the secondary level, we're going to expect them to be utilizing Google Classroom, those sort of things, so that they're used to it when we get in there. One of our PD days at the beginning of the year is going to be entirely technology day, right? So I think that'll work. I mean, we obviously we have people that are all different levels on our staff when it comes to technology. Everybody has the Google Classroom training now, okay? Having that time at the beginning of the year as a refresher would be really important. And knowing that at the secondary level, they're going to have their synchronous in person and their asynchronous can be different things for different teachers, I think is a good thing. But they have to be prepared, because if we have to go remote completely, they have to be able to do that in a synchronous every other day way. it'll be certain, it's a different learning curve for different people, as you know. But we'll certainly have time to work on it.
It's a question of why only the first 11 slides going up, and are we going to put the entire presentation up there?
The entire presentation will be up there. I think, and I won't speak for Jeff, but I'll speak for myself on that. The idea is this. I think most parents are going to want to really understand and look at slides 1 through 11 to make their decision on where they want their kid to start this school year, because that's where we're starting the school year. That's all. It is important to look at those other ones because of where we can transition to in the regular program. But I think really important to look at, here's how we expect to start the school year.
And I think Jen may have said it really perfectly throughout her presentation. All of this could be for naught come next week or at any other point, because ultimately the decision lies with what the governor decides for the reopening of schools. And we might be simply opening to close, throughout this entire process.
That's right.
So parents need to understand that, it's not just, it's not going to be Superintendent Lonich calling in, not the snow day, but the, school closing day. It's for everything. The governor is going to be really that person to listen to for those levels. You'll still call school, snow days in, or Allison when she wins it.
Yeah, absolutely. So here, and I think that's such an important point. The 1st through the 7th, August 1st through 7th, are the dates that the governor has given as that range to make the decision on the opening of schools, which is supposed to be based on the COVID positive rates. If they're 5% or above, school will not open in person in the fall, okay? Do I believe that I believe those range dates, though, are only the starting point. In other words, if on the 7th we know, and he says, yep, go ahead, in person, you're okay to start. You've turned in your plans, as long as they're approved, you can start. If on August 29th, COVID rates are raised to, let's use the number that's out there right now, 9%, above 9%, we close. I think it's possible, because school hasn't started yet, that an interpretation of that might be that if they're 5%, they don't know. The point is this: executive order could certainly impact us closing up and being completely remote. Okay, for those that are regular, the virtual will already be completely virtual at some point during the school year. It's possible.
Could you just highlight, what were those days, like the parent question days that you were going to host?
It's Monday, which is what day? 3rd? August 3rd and August 4th. There'll be time set up for elementary and time set up for secondary.
On both days, in elementary time?
An elementary and a secondary day on both times. The opposite times.
Who...
There's going to be an afternoon and an evening, flip-flopping the afternoon and the evening for the elementary and secondary levels. This will give people an opportunity to watch, listen to this presentation, and then ask any questions that they still have.
Any other board members have questions for the continuity of learning portion?
Well, it's actually for health and safety, but
yeah.
Say a student does have a medical condition, not, you can't do the virtual or something like that. How would that be accounted for?
Great question. Within the guidelines, students who have a medical condition are able to attend without a mask. That's in the guidelines.
And just piggybacking on that, that's different than a student who chooses to not wear a mask because...
Absolutely different, correct.
And can you just highlight what that it would look like?
Yeah, students have to wear masks. It's simple. And
I mean, like
the exception...
We provide them...
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So, oh, good. I'm sorry. We didn't talk about that at all, and that's my fault. We have ordered masks, cloth masks. They're gray. They're kind of like this one. They're nicer. For two for every student. And if a student comes in the morning to get on a bus without a mask, we will have some extra paper masks, the ones I think I saw some people wearing tonight, to give out. But our expectation is that they'll use these, they'll clean these. That's why we're giving them 2, not 1, so they can wear one, and then when it's soiled, change that out and switch it out with another one.
Anything else with continuity of learning? All right, moving over to crisis response. Any questions for that? I know I have a couple here, but if you guys want to jump in, I don't have to be the first one. All right, so we have a process of screening our employees on the way in. Our students screened other than the word of mouth from home from parents.
What was that? Did you say
Our students going to be screened. We bought these devices, for staff to walk through and be screened that way. Our students going to walk through the same thing.
Oh, okay. Let me, good question. Let me be clear on that. So let's talk about staff first. Staff have to self-assess every single day, every time they come in. And they're saying by coming into the building that they can answer all the questions in the right way to enter the building, okay? And by scanning themselves in, they're saying yes, that they're clear of any of the things that they can't be clear of on there. So COVID symptoms, having been in a place that's on the list of states you can't travel to, okay? That's for staff. For students, the expectation is this. Families every day will take temperatures and do health screenings of their own children. When they come to school and they come through our main entryways, we will have a temperature scanner set up there that will pick them up when they come in. And if somebody wasn't caught at home, ends up with a fever on the way, that temperature scanner will identify that student and we'll be able to pull that student aside and get them to the nurse. Okay. We will also have weekly, so periodic, but we're going to do it once a week, checks for families to say that their kids have been, as they enter the school week, that they can answer the right way to all 4 of those questions. Okay. So that'll be once a week. And Mr. Stack mentioned a little bit that we are looking at different pieces of software to help us keep track of that as we send it out to parents weekly.
Right.
A few different ways for us to do it.
Can you kind of give us the protocol? A student, like say, came to school, didn't really have fever during the day, he developed the fever. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What is the protocol for that student and the children in that classroom?
You want to answer that one? Sure. I'm more than happy to. As you just returned to your seat, Mr. Stack.
So the question again is, what is the procedure protocol for when a student?
Yes, it's you find that a student has got a fever and symptoms like COVID, and what is the procedure for the student and for the children in the class?
So,
and the teacher as well.
Sure, it's a great question. So the first thing is exactly what you just said. You identify the symptoms. There's a number of symptoms listed on the flow chart at the top. The school nurse will be calling the student down with a mask on, as you can see in the flow chart. And from there, the nurse will ask a series of questions, identify where the student is at, do the screening that she or he has to do in the office area. And from there, immediately notify parents of the symptoms, what they are, as well as the staff in that classroom of what the symptoms are and whether or not that student is going to be sent home, and identify whether or not the student will be sent home. From there, the nurse will be the tracking person for communication with the DOH as to whether or not that student, is in fact going to get tested, and then what the results of that test will be as they come back to the building.
Okay, so you've done that. Let's say we're not sure the person is COVID, child is COVID, or whatever the precautions were taken in the classroom itself. We don't know. Kids wasn't in that classroom. What do we do with kids in the classroom?
So in that classroom, it is a little bit specific, all right, in the guidance document that you open ventilation as much as you possibly can, and that you immediately take to cleaning the area if you feel remotely that the student, may have COVID, if that is possible to do safely with students in that room. So it may be during a transition time, it may be during a lunch where we blitz the room, we clean it if we can do so and advance the air circulation in there immediately. But really it's waiting for the response on the test and whether or not that particular student or staff member is tested and how that comes back from the DOH and the tracing efforts start.
But
Would
let
there
me,
be-
okay, to get back on that piece right quick. Let me ask you though, really, with FERPA though, that parent doesn't need to take that kid to get tested or
That's accurate.
let us know if there's a result there. And
That's
we,
accurate.
unlike, we used to be able to do, back when I started teaching in the past, you send letters home, hey, our class has this, going through it, had lice or strep or anything. There's no notification home that there was someone who was possibly positive, COVID positive in that room, and everyone could have been infected and dragged home.
Sure, absolutely.
And it's a great point. And that's where, we're going to treat it. And that's why the guidance document treat it as if it is, right? So you're going to clean you're going to clean the room. There's an expectation, and I think it's a good one, that when a parent doesn't take them to be tested, they don't have to share anything with us. Let's face it, even if they take them to be tested, we might not know for days, right? Sometimes 3, 4, 5 days. Those students now, if they come back the next day, it's going to be the nurse who's going to be, and that's what Mr. Stack was mentioning, will be the one tracking them to see, did they have a temperature? Did they? Because remember, people have temperatures for a lot of different reasons. The kid had a toothache, the kid had an ear infection, the kid, right? So if a student who goes out with a fever doesn't mean that they have COVID. And, we've certainly had both with staff, since we've been going through this, we've had staff members who have had fevers and not had COVID.
I guess my question is, are we treating it as it is COVID?
We're going to clean, if you mean like the cleaning and that sort of thing, we're going to clean those rooms as if it is, right? So it's symptoms of or have COVID. And that's why the flow chart, I know it's not up right now, is written that way.
Just from a practical standpoint, how stringent, we just look at symptoms of COVID. A lot of these
Yeah.
symptoms
Because,
symptoms that I could look over.
sure.
John Smith, at what point-
Good question. Fever's been the big one, right? And we're going to allow our nurses to diagnose. They won't ask me to do that. We'll let them do that. And if they think that, it's someone who has the symptoms of COVID, then we'll treat it as such. But you're right. The list got longer, right? No, it really did. I mean, I remembered what the 4 things were on it when it started, and now it's much larger.
Well, and likewise,
Yeah, no, and I think that the good point Allison's making is that remember the idea of social distancing and wearing masks. That's the reason, right? So I liken it. Anybody who's ever taken a first aid course, right? They know that they're supposed to come upon somebody who's bleeding and treat every single person as if they may have an infectious disease, as if they have the bloodborne pathogen rule is treat it as if the person has it. So we're living our day like everybody around you has it. We're wearing a mask all the time, except for during breaks. We're taking them off when we're, by guidelines, appropriately socially distanced. Okay? So, I think that's really important to keep in mind.
well, and that piece, to go along with that piece, that parent could easily take that child to get tested, not let us know. Give the child enough Tylenol where it breaks the fever. We don't see a fever, send them back to school the next day, and they're,
Sure.
in 3-4 days, find out, oh yeah, you're COVID positive.
Absolutely.
That is something that the state needs to address. Federal government and, with FERPA, but, besides the mask wearing though, it's, we know that's a problem with not just COVID, but with other things that come through the school. It's a common problem that we have. Because do we feel that we can adequately not just keep the other students safe, but also our cleaning staff, our teaching staff, our administrative staff in all this? If we can't have, parents being honest with us that, they have to be that person that helps us
100%.
break that
We
chain.
more than ever, we need to make sure that they're checking their kids, that they're not sending in kids who can infect others. No question. It has to be. And what I would say is this, and it's a really good point. What I would say is this. I think almost every parent every day is doing what they think is right for their kids and wouldn't put their kid or other people in harm's way. But with this, with COVID, they really need to make sure that if they think their kid is experiencing those symptoms, that they don't send them in, they don't pump them up with Tylenol to get rid of the fever so that pops back up at 11 o'clock in the morning. That's not fair to anybody. So it's a good point.
If it got to the point where you went to the health department, man, right, would there be some kind of contact tracing going on now?
Absolutely. So if there's a positive test, right? That's where the contact tracing kicks in. It doesn't,
Run that?
what's that? The county health department runs that, correct? Yep.
But would they then contact the school to get the information of every single student that could possibly?
So we have some examples of that already occurring in our schools that have occurred already this summer just with staff. And the contact tracing is actually pretty impressive. Yes, there is an email. It is sent to the employer in this case. In the fall, it will be, the educational institution. From there, they're going to be asking us a myriad of questions. Where the student was, who the student was in contact with, what a schedule looked like for that particular student, what buses the student was, a part of, whether it was multiple buses, say a BOCES student goes over to BOCES. So all of that appears to me to be something that the Department of Health will use for their tracing efforts with us. It's fairly comprehensive.
So going back to my bathroom scenario, we have to keep very good logs then too, when kids leave rooms and can cross contact each other in any of those situations.
I would think so. And obviously when you have, reduction in the amount of students that are in buildings, that does potentially at least free up some staff to maybe help us assist, maybe not in monitoring the bathrooms inside the bathrooms, but at least monitoring how many students are using them at a time at designated locations. So that's definitely going to have to be something that we look at.
Yeah, well, I mean, and just my thought of obviously working with students, hey, I need a mask break that's not part of the normal mask break procedure right now. So I'm going to go ask to go to the bathroom, and my entire walk down there is going to be a mask break. And we get in the bathroom, I'm just going to stand around in there, but I got a little cough, no fever, a little cough or anything like that, starting to develop symptoms. And now 3 or 4 other kids think they need their own made up mask break. And now they go in there, and now you are creating a very small, closed in, non-ventilated possibly area. How some of the bathrooms are, there's no windows, there's no, there's a vent that's on when it has the heat. That's about it. In there. I mean, we're creating potential situations that could, exacerbate the spread.
And I would just say this, the details about bathrooms we've certainly talked about to some degree, but we have to work those out even further. And when we did talk about that, one of the questions was, do you allow just one at a time? Those are all possibilities. Your point that somebody can walk down the hall without a mask, sure, they can if somebody's not there. I would say in our elementary schools, it's much more rare that they're not in contact with an adult, most times. But if they're walking down the hall alone and they're taking a mask break, we would say that that's not okay if it wasn't teacher directed. But if nobody's around them, they're also not compromising anybody if they're not walking by somebody. But all common areas, people will need to be wearing a mask.
Yeah, I'm just seeing the dynamics of the way a class runs,
Sure.
where the kids decide how they're going to build in their own mask breaks every period of the day.
And I know there's some work environments where if you're sick or you have a fever, you want to come back to work, you got to go get tested. Show me a negative result. Our concern, and everyone, is the safety of others. With all these other kids and staff, we can't request that.
We can ask. We can't force it though.
Can't force it.
So,
We can't say, oh, well, then you're going to have to go to virtual.
You're talking about for a student, you mean?
Yes. If our nurse thinks there's a problem and a parent is a little reluctant for whatever the reasons, we also got to be concerned about other students and staff. Can we say you should maybe go virtual for 2 weeks if you're not willing to get tested?
I don't believe we could force that, Rick, no.
Can it be suggested though?
I don't know. I'll find, we'll talk a little bit about it. I haven't given it any thought at all. Here's what I know. You can't force testing. You can't force it for staff. You can't force it for students.
You request a doctor's note upon return, much where a kid got a head injury in phys ed class before they got clearance to participate. We could always ask for, went to the doctor, clearance.
I don't know. I don't think so, but we'll see. Because again, you don't know we don't really know what they went home with, right? You know, so the way that we're treating it every day is that everybody has it. And, you know, I think that's the way we have to approach it. Because it's a great example, but, you know, there's going to be a lot of kids who have a lot of different, Jason mentioned all the different symptoms, right? They're going to have, they could have a lot of those and not have COVID.
The only thing I would add to that, you know, on the doctor note, Mr. Fucci, is, you know, the student, you know, is going into isolation. Then the DOH will track that. The DOH will then issue clearance for that student to come out of the isolation period back to school. Same with the staff.
That's if
Same
they
with the
go.
staff. That's if they go through with the testing. Correct. That's right.
That's not if a child they sent from home. That's
right.
Right. That doesn't nothing for us.
Correct. Only if they went for testing.
They went for testing.
I mean, because the other concern is, and I've heard this from parents too, is not necessarily the kid, because a kid can be an asymptomatic carrier. But let's say someone tests positive at home, mother, father, and now that kid's coming back and forth to school, knowing that possible asymptomatic, you know, again, I think we're setting ourselves up for a perfect storm where things are going to snowball. Now, I could be wrong, because I mean, you've seen studies both ways. You know, I know I've seen the articles about Germany and them and reopening schools there and in the, you know, the northern European countries. Then you saw the Israelis and what happened there. But and what people have to understand is we're hopefully doing the model that's more like the northern European, where there's 15 kids in a class. You know, Israel, if you read what their class numbers were, there's 40 to 60 kids in a class. You know, definitely no social distancing going on.
That's right.
Any other questions, especially on the crisis response one? Just follow up. Just thinking back to the sports and that whole question we asked if you're going to be virtual. Can we get an answer for that before the commitment letters are due?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, you have some questions that maybe could you show?
Yeah, I could do that.
Could you?
Yeah, as I say, you should put me as a participant. Could I just head it up here because I have the live stream up here right now?
I'm gonna grab this mic and you can do it with this mic.
Sure. Or can I just take mine?
This will pick up on the Zoom.
Okay.
You can sing into that one better too.
Yeah.
It's on this left over here.
Sure.
All right, there you go.
All right, thank you. And I'm tangled. All right. First question. Can you please review what this will look like and the length of time indoors, outdoors, and classes? Okay, so what I'm going to summarize with this one is how much time indoors, outdoors, indoors versus outdoors in class?
So more time indoors, but we will certainly utilize.
Oh, and based on the mask break. It says, I may have missed what entails a mask break. Can you please review what this will look like? I.e. length of time, if it's going to be indoors versus outdoors in class.
It would be a mix of both, and it would be determined by, and it would be done when students are socially distanced. And, you know, I think the benefit to September, usually September's Western New York are pretty nice. So we'll, you know, I know our elementary schools especially utilize the outdoors. I can't imagine a decent day that our PE teachers at the secondary level wouldn't be utilizing the turf outside, which is plenty of square footage, regardless of whether or not it just rained or not. It could still be utilized, unlike, you know, grass fields and stuff like that in the past.
Okay. someone asked, is elementary defined as K-5 or K-6?
Elementary is defined by us as K-5.
Okay.
6 through 12 is our secondary. Those are our secondary buildings.
All right, very good.
Accepted Tuscarora, thank you. Thank you.
The next one says, I may have missed something, but what is different from regular to hybrid and secondary level? If they are not in school every day, it's hybrid only if it is not.
Can you read the first part of that?
Yeah,
again?
it says I may have missed something. What is different from regular to hybrid in secondary
Okay,
level?
So let me say it this way. The regular program means in person, could mean in person, could mean hybrid, or could mean remote. And what we're starting with is the hybrid model where they're coming every other day.
Okay. And so the second part was, if they are not in school every day, is it hybrid only if it is not?
If they're correct, if they're,
Yeah.
exactly. So if they're not in school every day, which is what we're talking about, they're in a hybrid. In other words, we're going to start, and we talked about the start of the school year. Both our elementary and our secondary, in essence, it's a phased-in model, but it's every other day. So you could say it's hybrid. Once September 22nd comes, our plan is to move our elementary to completely in person, and our secondary will stay in that every other day model.
Question for technology. Will there be Chromebook rental made available for all students? We have 2 school-age children in our family. So that's the first part. I'll
Yep,
bring that, let you do that
They
one
do not
first.
need to rent them. They'll just need to make it known that they'll need them, and we will supply them.
I think they're asking that just because, remember, we ran out of Chromebooks, so it was like 1 per family in the spring. This is going to be, every kid will get one, because I mean, if they're doing synchronous learning, they may need each have one.
Yep, with the survey results, and I don't know if this person, how they answered the question on the survey, but with the survey results, I think we were at 850. We needed about 850 devices were identified as being needed, and we can certainly provide those.
Okay. The second question from Jennifer Stewart was buses. Will bus service be provided, or are we expected to drive children to school each day? That's a good question. I had that question written down. Actually, I forgot to ask it. So based on that survey, we're assuming that half of the people who answer yes, I can drive my kid is committing to 10 weeks of driving.
Correct.
Also?
Correct. So transportation will be provided unless families say they're going to drive every day. If they're going to drive every day, we're going to take them out of the scheduling for the buses. Okay. So that's important. And we would do that every 10 weeks. Yep.
Okay. And that's a key thing I think we have to keep stressing. This is a 10-week commitment right now.
Correct.
For everything.
Correct. Yep.
So
we just added, that means that if they commit to driving, they wouldn't be stopping at the homes. What we did, and we'll do in the follow-up commitment, right? We're going to be asking, when we did in the first one, is your ability to transport your child different in the morning than in the afternoon? We need both answers.
Sure. This next question, I'm going to piggyback on something I had jotted down also. Will 5th graders have band and instrument instruction? And could you just touch on what band, chorus, music will look like at this middle school and high school level too?
Great. Yep, absolutely. So, we have a luxury at the secondary level that we don't necessarily have at the elementary level when it comes to space and using the auditorium to really space students out in our music program. So we'll be utilizing that most of the time. At the elementary level, what we're looking at is probably doing some smaller groups as opposed to larger groups. And so we can then still have our social distancing, but have kids sing or play instruments. Okay. So that's what we're looking at. We're still working through those details. That'll be part of the schedule, as we build that master schedule at each elementary school.
And I can say at this point, probably we're not looking at having evening concerts, obviously, with.
I think that's very fair. So, when they talk, and I think this is very intentional, in the Department of Health document, and then NICE came out with a document that reiterated this about core activities. I would think some of those, I think all of those evening things, those, any large gatherings, all of those things are going to be off the table until we hear otherwise. We're not going to be planning anything that's additional, that's extra, that is bringing large groups of people together.
Okay.
Good question. I'm glad you asked that way because it really is about all of those larger activities. And we didn't bring this up, but we are going to be looking at doing our orientations differently. We'll be looking at doing our open, and all this information will be coming out later, right? This is more about the reopening plan. But any of those large group activities, if we can do them through Zoom, we're going to do them that way. We're not going to bring large groups of people together whenever we can avoid it.
All right. Will we know which model we are starting at before we sign a commitment letter? That was the question, is will we know which model we are starting at before we have to sign a commitment letter?
If you're looking at the presentation, what you'll see is how we're saying we're going to start. So you have to assume that that's the way we're starting. Now remember, if in essence the plug is pulled, the difference between remote and virtual isn't really going to be different. So here's, if I'm making a decision at home, right? And I have this choice to make. If I, our parents are in a district that's giving the remote, the completely virtual as an option. So if I'm making that decision, I'm looking at how the school year is starting. Do I want my kid to have in person, or at least the possibility of it, for as long as possible? Or do I want the completely virtual?
Mm-hmm.
I think I have to weigh that decision.
All right. Could we please talk about what the BOCES program will look like, especially Allied Health, whose classroom is at the hospital?
So, but BOCES has not put out their final plan yet, but I know this. They are planning on being in session every day. I don't know about, some of those internships and work studies that are built into their program. I'm sure places like hospitals, I'm sure those things are going to be much more difficult to have happen. But they're still looking at getting the in-person time. But I know Mr. McDermott actually serves on their board as well.
They are looking to do that. Question I'll ask is, because I know because of that, but transportation to BOCES. These kids will be going every other day. Let's say they're doing the hybrid.
Yep.
Classes at BOCES will be every day. We're still going to supply.
We'll still transport them every day. Correct. That's right.
Okay.
But did we? Just to be clear, they don't have commitments from all of those outside organizations yet, do they? No, I didn't think so. One of the things that we did stress, I'll just say this, because I think this applies to, many of our 11th and 12th grade parents. In our superintendent's group with our district superintendent, there is a goal to keep all of those programs running, because we know that they're, in most cases, 2-year programs that these students are counting on. So finding ways to make them work is critical for those students, their programs and their diplomas.
Next person asked if there is testing for Legionella since shutdown.
If they're for
Legionnaire's disease.
In shutdown?
Since shutdown.
Oh, yeah. Have we tested for that? No.
Okay. All right. I'm unable to look back at the info on the slideshow, but while this was live, after 2 weeks, I believe we said that elementary students would be in attendance every day. Did you say they would be split AM PM sessions?
No.
All right. So there's no split. It's like a normal school day.
Correct.
Yeah. Have there been any concrete plans on where band and chorus will need to take place for the 12-foot distance between students? Some of these questions are repeating from the previous one. So yeah, we explained that one. In one of the documents, it said that hand dryers should not be used because it could aerosolize the germs. Would that be the same for fans?
As I said, I don't know if that person heard. We're going to look into that answer. I don't know.
All right, so we'll look into that.
I haven't seen anything. I didn't see anything in those guidance documents about fans.
All right. Obviously, something we can even ask the Department of Health and
Sure.
our rep for.
Absolutely.
So,
We'll find out.
all right. How will wearing be enforced? For example, masks should be worn over the nose, mouth, etc. Masks need to be worn properly to be effective.
Training. That's why we're starting in the hybrid model at all of our levels. We'll have small enough groups to really work on that as part of the training for staff and students.
Okay. At the high school level, if a student does not have a lunch period because their schedule is full, will they still be allowed to eat in class?
Yes, I wouldn't think that would change at all. So if a student has a full schedule, would they be able to take food? Here's what in our secondary level, we're going to be even more, assuming the numbers stay the way they are, students are going to be more socially distanced in most of our secondary classes because of the hybrid.
Okay. Will the district have one-to-one computing access for students in school? Will students need to share? Is the expectation for elementary classrooms masks and social distancing, or masks or social distancing? We'll break that into four. We'll answer it in four. So will the district have one-to-one computing access for students in school?
In school, we don't have one-to-one computing access in our school. We don't have one-to-one devices now.
So students will need to share, in other words.
Yeah, but we wouldn't be doing that on a daily basis.
Yeah, but I mean, like if you have like sets of Chromebooks.
We do share, and they'd be wiped down. Screens would be wiped down. Keypads, that sort of thing.
All right. So then the next part is the expectations for elementary classrooms, masks and social distancing, or masks or social distancing?
It's masks or social distancing. Masks almost all the time, right? I just want to make sure we say this the same way every time. Masks are the rule. There will be teacher-directed times when masks can come off. And that will not be ever when social distancing is not possible, right? So if you can't be socially distanced, the mask always is on.
So like, for example, you get into a room where it's just too small. We have like 4 feet between each of us, can't social distance in that. Hey, we're not doing a mask break right now in this. We'll wait to a situation where it's,
Great example.
we can have, okay. Would secondary students who choose the regular program have a need to transport their method of technology, for example, their laptop or Chromebook, to and from school? I'm thinking what they're saying is that if they're in the hybrid and they use their technology the one day at home, so they have their Chromebook at home, would they have to bring it to school with them the days that they come to actual school?
Sure. So if they don't have their own devices at home and we provide them with devices and the teacher is using asynchronous learning at home that requires a device, they would then have to take that back and forth, perhaps. But what I would say is it'll be dependent on the teacher. They may not need that device in school at all. So it may be one that could just stay at home.
Okay. Just give me 1 second here. This is not a Mac, so it's annoying to use. Okay, so as a parent of an Eric Road 3rd grader, do we have an idea of what restrictions will be in place on students that choose in-person instruction? Will they be allowed to participate in movement, recess, centers, CE classes, sharing of books, etc.? I'm concerned about her just sitting in her desk from 9 to 3:15.
Yeah, no, there's the expectation is that students will be moving around, that they will, and within their cohort, they are able actually to share equipment, and that is in there, right? It's in the guidance documents. So it will not be a students chained to a desk environment. It will not be. Will they go outside? Will they, all of those things? Sure. Yes.
All right. So can a student start in the regular program and then after like a week or two decide, I really am nervous about this. Can I change the virtual?
No. 10 weeks. We're committing to 10 weeks. We're setting up our schedules for 10 weeks.
So what would happen in a situation like that, though? I mean, that's because that's
if a student was in that situation and there was a medical reason, they'd go on what's called home hospital instruction, but they wouldn't be put into our virtual program.
Okay.
We can't have people jumping in and out of these programs.
Okay. All right.
It's a good question.
We cannot hear the panelists. Will there be an answer to sports before the commitment letters? That popped up on my screen before. That's when I asked that one. And we did answer that one. Elementary is defined as K to 5 or K to 6. We answered that. It is K to 5. Okay. I'm assuming concerts and musical will not be able to happen this school year. Is this correct?
I think you answered that already.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Let's ask about clubs though. You know, and because that wasn't we.
Good question. We do expect after August 7th, if we know that we're going to be able to be open, we do expect to post for our clubs, for those extracurricular activities, co-curricular activities, with the idea that we'll put kind of a / virtual, so people understand that if they're taking on one of those clubs, that we may be in a situation where some of it's virtual, where some of it's not. We're going to really try to cut down on any additional activities where we're bringing kids together, right? After school or that sort of thing. So we'd probably, especially at the start, be looking at those things being done in a virtual way.
I mean, that would be neat to see a virtual musical too. I mean, a lot of video editing and some.
I did not say
practice
musical.
and
You
stuff.
said other clubs. I don't.
I'm just thinking outside the box. You know.
Sure, it can be done.
Will teachers be able to depend on having their Chromebook carts, or have they been passed out? Is there a concern with collecting papers in terms of germs?
Well, let's start with the first one. What's the total number of devices that we'll have at the start of the year? And we're only loaning, remember this, we're only loaning out if it's somebody who said that they needed one, but we're in the in-person model, they wouldn't necessarily need one to start. But if we transition, then they may need one. So we're going to have 1,150 additional devices that we'll be able to share throughout our buildings. And then, how many more are coming?
Yeah, we ordered 625 arrive in December.
We actually talked about that at our last board meeting. Thank you for allowing us to push that up a year. So we're actually replacing those, or instead of replacing, we're adding to our current numbers 625.
All right. Second part. Is there a concern with collecting papers in terms of germs?
I don't see that. Certainly that's not in any of the guidance. Department of Health didn't say that. So I would say no.
I will say what the problem with papers are with the foggers. If any paper, like copy paper, it curls. So that's going to be just a thing to work around in classrooms. Is can't leave papers out if you don't want them curled up. What is the protocol for a student or staff member that travels out of state?
Great question. I don't know if we do or we will have a flow chart for that one, by the way. It's one of them, but.
Earlier in the presentation, I had mentioned that students will be surveyed periodically and parents will be attesting to the fact that if their son or daughter has traveled to a quarantined area or they have as a family, they will not be allowed entry to the school.
All right, so let me piggyback on that piece, because we mentioned about, allowing a kid in who's possibly going to get tested for COVID, who has, we sent home sick, may refuse to. But if we know that you have traveled to a state that's on that quarantine list, we can deny entry into our schools, though, from that then?
That's my understanding of it, yes.
And let me just piggyback on that. For staff, there is certainly a bit of a debate out there about whether or not, let me say it this way, how the restriction applies to people who work in education because of the category essential that they do fall under. So we have a couple different answers that we've received. So it's something that we're working on kind of getting a final answer for. And whenever I say we, I mean probably every district in the state right now is looking for a final answer on that question. You mean staff? Depends on who you ask. As a matter of fact, depends on which, maybe law firm you ask that they might work with. No, I'm serious. That's something that does need to be worked out because there's both state and federal documents that are pointed to when it comes to that piece of legislation, executive order. That's kind of getting mixed, I think. So we'll have a definitive answer on that real soon, or at least definitive by the opinion that we take.
Are you going to force children to get a test for COVID every time they catch a cold or have allergies? What is the criteria to force a child to be tested?
You can't force anybody to get tested.
Yeah.
Correct. Recommend.
If a child or staff test positive, are they going to be require all students in their class to quarantine and miss school?
So it depends, and we don't handle that. So when there is that confirmed case, the Department of Health and their contact tracing will take over, and they'll make those determinations. They're going to do the contact tracing. They're going to make determinations, and we've only had this happen now with staff, but it's a lot has to do with the questions that are asked, right? About social distancing and wearing a mask. So, I'll give you an example of one that we had with staff. Were you around somebody? Were you around this person? Were you within 6 feet and not wearing a mask at any time in this defined period? And if you were, then there's going to be a requirement to quarantine and a recommendation for that person to be tested.
Mm-hmm. Are the kids going to have to wear a mask during gym class?
They would wear a mask to gym class up until probably they participate in activities in PE. But once they're separated far enough away, socially distanced, then they could take it off. They wouldn't have it on during aerobic activity.
Okay.
We'll start the year mostly outside, right? Which is really good. Again, because of what it looks like, our diminished numbers, a gymnasium is going to be a lot bigger than it was before, right? At all levels, the gymnasium size is the same. The amount of space for each student is going to be greater. Let me say it that way. For somebody who might ask the next question, how are you making your gymnasium bigger?
That was the last capital project.
I thought you might ask that question.
Yeah. So hybrid means 1 week, 2 days, and then the next week, 3 days.
Correct. Every other day.
Okay. I got a question on that one. How will that fall? Technically, then someone may only be in school with holidays, or if we have like a staff development or something like that, maybe 1 day that week cycle. Is that correct? Or that week?
So if we had a 3-day week and somebody the week before, the students who were there Friday would only be there Tuesday and then be off? Sure. But the other ones would be there too. Right? And then they would be the first ones back.
I'm just thinking the semantics of how that was scheduled will work. There's going to be some where you're only there 2 days.
It's a good question. And I think people who took off other days during the week had to worry about that a little bit more. If you go every other day and you define those every other days on the schedule as the student days, right? The every other student day, that's what we'll do. Each group would be there for the same number of days over the course of the year.
All right. Will you be offering after-school programs for elementary students? I'm thinking, I'm just going to sort of guess what that one is that might be basing on like our...
Like the why?
Yeah, like the why.
Okay, so really good question. So I can't imagine us coming back and not offering that why program to families. I don't know how else they have regulations that they need to follow. I don't know how else they would work for some of those families for both drop off and pickup. We have not worked through any of those details yet. So that's something that we will have to do with them. Something like other extracurricular activities that they would have, I would say again at the beginning of the year, probably nothing unless it was something that was virtual.
Yeah, well, I mean, someone again piggybacked on that. Well, they reiterated that we'd be offering after-school child program, care programs for elementary students, which is the why. And the answer for that is yes.
The answer
Then
for that is yes.
okay, they will have to conform though to all our
Correct.
rules and not what just the regular daycare
That's
rules would be
correct.
in there.
That's right.
Okay. Will the 10-week commitments be calendar weeks or school weeks?
It'll be defined by the end of the quarter marking periods at the secondary level.
Okay. Just because in the elementary there's three marking
They have
periods, right?
3 semesters, correct.
So
We're gonna use the
10
secondary
okay.
level, yeah.
I'm specifically wondering about the second 10 weeks when they're on winter breaks. Is break included in the 10-week count?
So the end of the second semester, I don't know the day of that right now. Anybody know? January 27th.
Yeah.
So that would be the end of the second 10 weeks.
Okay, so yeah, it does count winter break.
Correct.
Yeah.
Just like the one in the spring counts the spring break.
Yeah. So if it is a normal elementary school day after 2 weeks, the social distancing in the classrooms would no longer take place. The classroom will now be the classrooms will now be full classrooms. That's a question.
Okay, good question. Full classrooms as far as everybody coming in. Right now, we're doing the runs. Remember, this is why it's really important that we get the data back from all the families. We're looking at 33%, so 1/3 not returning. In the first runs, the largest class on September 22nd, the largest class size is 15 point something students. We're going to look to even minimize some of those larger ones a little bit more and do some adjusting. But as of right now, the largest number, assuming everybody who answered stays exactly where they are, we'd be at 15.
And then she asked, how will they fit if they have to social distance?
So we've actually put desks in most of our classrooms. What was 16? About 16. We obviously have different class sizes, right? But that we can get in elementary rooms, about 16 desks and be socially distanced.
So let me ask you this piece now then myself. This is not on here. Let's say after the commitment letters come back, that 33% now jumps down to 10%.
Then we need less virtual, right? We need less people doing the
Well, I mean, but hits up at the elementary level mainly.
That's okay. So, yep. So we would need less virtual and we would slide more of our teachers into classrooms.
But would there be anything where we wouldn't have enough or we couldn't maintain social distancing where we'd have to say, okay, we have to jump to hybrid now because of how many people did not commit to?
I don't think so. We didn't run every percent model yet, right? But we would find a way.
All right. Could we possibly just, as a board, could we get some that as a possibility, see if that's a possibility where we might have to, after the commitment letters come back, if that's a model?
Yeah, no, we would certainly share where we're at.
All right. If students or teachers are not wearing masks properly and refuse compliance, what are the consequences?
Well, first we're going to retrain them, but if students multiple times can't follow that order, we'll be looking at another option for them because they can't be here putting people at risk.
All right. Are students switching classes in secondary? There was talk of students staying put and teachers were moving.
The secondary level?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not.
Okay. What about like the middle school? As I know in some situations in the middle school, they're closer contained.
Yeah, there may be some classes where they could do something like that, but that's not part
All
of
right.
it. Remember, those students, the secondary students are moving.
Okay. What about Boy Scouts and Girl Scout programs in school?
Anything that's running after what? So it's interesting because the question came up about the why. The other program that we are contemplating and we're talking about is community ed. I'm going to be meeting with the person who operates that program within the week. We're going to talk a little about that. Right now, I can't see any of the additional things that we have after school running because we can't be cleaning after those things.
Mm-hmm.
We just can't. We're going to be working at the max to clean after our own program. especially at the beginning of the year. We'll see how it goes, and we may be able to change that after, so many weeks. And if we do, we'll certainly let people know. But anything that requires a building permit, we won't be giving out building permits for those extra things.
Okay. Are you breaking down secondary alphabetically for in-person or by program area? For example, jazz ensemble class, so they can be in class together where it's necessary for the program. So in secondary, how we were going to do A through whatever letter, and then whatever letter that, like for jazz ensemble, obviously, will they ever all meet together? Or are we going to break that program into, hey, you're all in jazz ensemble, you're going to be coming with the A to whatever group because of that piece.
We haven't built that yet.
Okay.
Well, we'd have to see how it plays out. But right now, it's going to be by household.
Okay.
By household.
Will there be teachers assigned to remote classes only, or will every teacher have a remote group to teach?
So, good question. At the elementary level, the teachers who would be, I want to make sure I use the right word, completely virtual, right? Those teachers in the elementary model who are teaching the kids who are not coming in at all, who are completely virtual, they're going to only be doing that. At the secondary level, the schedule is going to be built with virtual periods embedded into the schedule. And a teacher could have some regular, some virtual. We'll do our best, and certainly to accommodate even some of our teachers who might need an accommodation, to give them, if we can, a full virtual schedule. That'll be one of our goals in this. But you could have both. You could have both. So I could be teaching 2 Global 9s, 2 Global 10s, and 1 Global 10 virtual.
Okay. That's the last of the questions in the chat. I'm just going to ask if there's any last minute questions that people want to write on real quick. I'll give you a minute to do so. Because I'm going to go back to board members with any of the questions that were asked here. Is there anything that you need followed up on, or anything that did that trigger any other questions for you guys?
It's a good classroom teacher wait time, Mr. Sabo.
I'm just thinking of people typing, how long
It's a good wait time.
I've seen how you type, so
It's good. I'd still be going, you're right, especially if it's a text.
All right, if you see any new questions pop on, do you perceive busing being very early?
We haven't run, we need student counts to know what those numbers are. I don't believe so. I don't think that they should have to run any earlier unless we were adjusting our student schedule to be earlier, which I don't foresee either.
Okay. And actually, do you perceive busing being very early to accommodate spacing? I missed the second part of that.
Again, numbers will dictate a lot of this, but if we're at 33% less students, right, we're from the get-go, we're going to have more space on all of our buses. At the secondary level, we'll be at 1/3 of our normal secondary run capacity.
Go ahead.
Good question. So the buses will still come at the same time, but they'll be let off as opposed to, hey, open all your doors and let them all through the door. We'll do 2 at a time. So as they come in, where normally you might have them all wait, and this is the exact time that they walk off, we'll have a little bit more of a range there. It's going to take us a little bit longer to get them in for sure, but we're going to do them at so many buses at a time. Good question.
So parents, this question came in. It's a really good question. Parents might drop kids off a little early. Will there be supervised spaces to allow kids to enter the building and wait?
We will not have congregation areas in our building, so there cannot be. One of the things, and we've adjusted the high school schedule, or we are looking to adjust the high school schedule a little bit, where there were extra minutes at the beginning of that day. We won't have that many. When students get here, they're going to need to get to their homeroom because they cannot be congregating. So we won't have common areas for people to gather. That's one of the things that in the guidelines they've really pushed against, is having those areas. So I don't anticipate that.
And someone asked if we have more people dropping kids off, let's say to ETMS in the high school. And I mean, I've dropped my own kids off, so I know what the traffic flow is like in the morning with you drop one off here at this door, then shoot try. Are you making any accommodations to say maybe we direct people a bit better about how we're going to have traffic flow move through
We're
here?
going to have to monitor that. What I would say though, remember, I know what it's normally like as well, but we have half of the people coming on a particular day.
Mhm.
So does the increase, I don't know off the top of my head what the percentage is that normally drives, but let's pretend like it's 25%, right?
Mhm.
Now let's say it's double that, but you have half the population. We're right back where we started. Just check with the math.
Well, I think one of my issues with that is because I've seen people cut through
you
the.
agree with Jeff? Okay. So we got two yeses, so then that makes sense.
I mean, I've seen people cut through the bus
Yeah.
only area. You know, if you have some more cars zipping down through there now, it's just.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
something we're going to have to monitor. I think, but one of the ideas here with the hybrid is that it cuts down on a lot of that traffic,
Mhm.
right? I mean, it cuts it down.
And I just noticed our signs got changed out here on.
The speed
Yes.
limit. Yeah. I knew that was happening. I didn't see him yet, but yeah.
So, yep, they see him now. So, you know,
It's good.
Mike's going to be watching for everyone there now.
It's really good.
How many doors are going to be open for drop off in the morning?
We're just going to use our main doors. So we're
Okay.
going to do it in a controlled way, of course, and we're going to do it through the scanners because we're going to have our main scanners. What we don't want to compromise is all of the other safety measures that we've built in, having multiple entrances in a building. COVID is a current crisis. We also know that people trying to get into our schools to do harm is another. And that's something that we've been fighting and building against now for years, and we're not going to interrupt that.
Okay. Are all grades numerical or are they pass fail?
Grading will be the same as it's been in past years. We'll use our normal grading for all students.
So that's a point I wanted to make because we talked about that. It's, you know, virtual now is not going to look like what we ended the school year with from the shutdown to the end. This is more, you know, if you're doing virtual, if you're doing the remote, it's going to be more. I think the best way that someone said it was it's going to be looking like more like at the college level where there's going to be direct instruction going on, where you're going to have that video. It's not going to be just here's something to work on, here's some review stuff, you know, whatever happens. So that the parents need to understand that it's what you saw at the end of the year with us trying to piece together, and we did a great, and all the staff, I mean, everyone did a great job, you know, with every aspect of it, you know, with meals, with technology, with getting stuff to kids. They did a great job. The thing is that we pieced that together in a matter of weeks.
We learned a lot.
Now this is a planned out rollout of everything, and it's going, so we're expecting school to be as normal in grading wise and work wise.
Correct.
All right, give another couple of seconds here and go ahead.
Yeah, that'll be scheduled in all of our buildings. Yeah. And we've also, as you can imagine, we've spent quite a bit of time already talking about the pickup and how that's going to work. And, you know, parents wearing masks when they pick up. We're talking about tents for the pickup areas outside, as opposed to coming into the buildings. A lot of details. A lot of details to be worked out there. Yeah, good.
All right. I think I'm going to then wrap up the question. If you do see anyone pop anything on, just, you know, shout over to me. But I want to thank everyone who did put questions in. We'll have the other question sections, as we said, next week, Monday and Tuesday. So after you rewatch this and take into account all the documents and everything, and, you know, if you feel like some entertainment value, want to read what, you know, was put out by NISA, the 100 and some odd pages, to ask more questions, feel free to. But I'll wrap up in our presentation with this, and we'll move on with the regular meeting. say that was the resident comment section there that we went through then. Consensus agenda items, I call for a motion to approve the consensus agenda items for accepting the minutes of the previous meeting, to adopt the code of conduct as presented at our hearing, to adopt the building level school emergency response plans, to adopt the approve the asset disposal list, to approve the tax warrant for 2020-21, and to approve the IEPs as submitted.
I'll make a motion. Second.
Any questions on anything? Anything to separate? All right, all those in favor then, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed or abstaining? Motion carries. All right, call for a motion to accept the personnel items as submitted.
So move.
Second.
All right, any item to separate or discuss? All those in favor then, please say aye. Aye. Opposed or abstaining? Motion carries. All right, Capital Project Committee, I'll turn that over to the superintendent right now.
Apologize for those of you who are getting too much of my voice this evening. Just a couple quick updates. If you haven't seen, I know Mr. Sabo's been posting some pretty neat pictures of the turf. We're getting close. They're on schedule to be finished by the third week in August. But it's really coming together. It looks great. A lot of work went into that, a lot of planning. Every time I get a chance, thank all the people who took part in our capital project committee to get that up and ready. And, even though it looks as though, the start of the fall season for sports is certainly in jeopardy, and who knows about the rest, that area is going to prove incredibly useful for all of our PE classes come this fall at the secondary level. That space will be critical. For those who know Western New York Falls, you know that it can get very wet very fast. When that happens, you tend not to go outside because you're bringing all the mud, all the dirt back in. So outdoor activities tend to come to a halt. With the turf, we wouldn't have that same restriction. So the amount of space that's out there certainly will be beneficial given this crisis that we're living under. Our Smart Schools project is moving along as scheduled as well. Again, there's a lot of safety included in that plan, in that project, and that's moving as we had hoped. The crosswalk at Eric Road, we're still waiting for completion on, but all the approvals are through. We just received a document and agreement for maintenance of the crosswalk lines from the town today. So we'll get that signed, we'll get that back, and then I think will be construction of that light, and then the lining will all be able to take place. So that's really good. I also want to touch on the Niagara County Youth Bureau Summer Food Program. That's going really well. Spoke with Alex today, who works with our food service program, and he said that the delivery, that stuff has gone pretty smoothly. We did add a half an hour, and I think another half an hour at our West Street, where we had the most food to give out. The most people were coming there to pick up, and but it's going really well, and I think it's a great thing that the Youth Bureau was able to provide for our families. Online registration. Mr. Stack, you want to just reiterate the importance of that?
Absolutely. We just updated some of the signage on the outdoor signs of some of our buildings, and that is still in process. Just to remind families that it is online. The numbers are coming into focus for us, and the one thing that we're just noticing is same as the last update I gave to the board is we have to track down parents for bits and pieces of information that they may have not submitted online. Those are just things that will be important as we start getting firm student numbers closer to the school year.
Okay. Any questions? Policy committee, we have nothing new today, right?
Nothing new there. We did get our quarterly updates from BOCES. I'll be working with a meeting.
Okay. You have an early graduation as an informational item on there. Just make sure you've reviewed it, please. Actually, going back to the capital project committee piece, just to let you know the drone shots that are out there that I've been putting up. It has been just to take a look from above to see the immensity of how big that complex really is now is impressive. I mean, I just, it's you start watching and I felt bad. Who was it that I told you I buzzed?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we had one of our employees out there, and I flew a little low. I might have spooked someone, so it was. I apologize for that.
Mr. Bissell, Mr. Sabo is sorry.
Yeah, it was very sunny, and I was trying to fly visually and just didn't go well. So I apologize for that piece, but yeah, it was the shots are great. I know that the other piece that looks very impressive, if you guys ever do go back there, I was hoping that we'd have some more light when we were ending today to go back there, is the space, and I talked to the superintendent about this, between the bleachers of the old field and in the new field. When you see that, I mean, it's just impressive to look down that road and see that complex coming together like that. So good job with the capital project committee and our architects in planning that and getting that all pieced together. Because I know we spent a couple meetings just talking about bleachers and seating and went back and forth about those. Well, besides the color, I mean,
all of it. Yeah.
All right. President's report. Like I said, we're entering a new school year that we can say it's definitely a new school year. We haven't ever gone through an opening like this. I ask parents for patience because the one thing that we do as educators is monitor and adjust. And trust me, we'll be doing that through this entire opening process, even before so. I mean, things can change in New York State, by the day, and we've seen that with the executive orders that have gone out there. So I ask parents to, please be patient with the staff in dealing with them. Make sure if you do have questions, the best place to get those answers is calling the superintendent's office and speaking with him. That's, especially with any of the after we do the couple question sessions and the governor puts out whatever he puts out, I'm sure you may have questions there. Board members always direct people with the reopening, based on reopening plans, to the superintendent, for responses for that. That being said, trust me, I can guarantee every single board member up here has had just the thoughts of opening, and we try to look at any possibility, and we try to predict any possibility and plan for every possibility of what could happen, from the best case scenario that we have all of a sudden, no more infections in the area and things go smoothly and we're able to bring kids back and have a full school year, to the worst case scenarios of how bad things could possibly get in a pandemic, and having that here. We're going to do the best we can with these plans. I've said this to numerous people. These plans, there's always someone who's not going to be happy with something that's in this. And, we're going to put the best piece together that we feel, based on the information given to us and the directives given to us, that will keep students safe, keep our staff safe, and to make sure kids are being educated, which is our primary job. And trust me, if at any point that we as a board, or particularly the superintendent and his staff, feel that safety cannot be maintained, I'm sure that they're going to bring that to, could be Dan Stapleton with the health department, and the superintendents meet almost daily now with
Weekly.
Yeah.
Sometimes more than once a week.
So understand that as we're opening this, it's not just us as a school and our superintendent deciding on this. We're trying to do this regionally, with Orleans, Niagara, BOCES, so that there's commonality there, so that, we're not sitting there and saying, hey, well, why didn't you do it like this with the neighbor? Because the last thing we need to do is get into a battle in the community where we're starting to put school districts' decisions against each other, and why one person did this, why did this district not do this? Trust me, the Falls are going to do, the Niagara Falls will do something different than what Barker will do. Because When you go from population, even with us, it's about 3,500 students down to Barker's 200, obviously they have a lot more space that they can and possibly have everyone come back. And even like with Wilson and, you know, even Lew-Port's what, 400 and some odd students now or in total, no, the high school, I
don't know the
think.
exact number, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, while their plans may look slightly different because of their population size, you know, if you look at the same size population schools that we have up here, we're going to try keeping consistent. And that's what the superintendents have spoken on weekly, you know, and or texted to midnight, as I've heard, in some situations with planning things.
And just to add to that, you know, I think it's a good point. Many of the districts in our BOCES did surveys. Certainly the responses in districts were different, right? So, you know, understanding that we're setting up a program that we think, and particularly with the virtual, that we think meets many of our families' needs, potentially a third of our families' needs. That's not going to be true in every district. So when you see some of the differences, a lot of that's going to have to do with what can work in their districts, right? Mm-hmm. So there will certainly be, you know, some differences. What won't be different is that all districts have to have an in-person, a hybrid, and a remote plan, and that some districts, not all, will offer a completely virtual plan, and like we did. So, but some may not. So that will be one thing that, you know, you might see that's different. You know, the days that people come in, those sort of things will, you know, be different. But everyone had to remember. I think it's interesting. I don't know that this was so intentional, but I like the wording. When this was referred to as continuity of learning from the beginning, right, back in March, now our continuity of learning plans, the idea is that we have to have continuity of learning, even if we have to transition back and forth between these three different models. And it won't be perfect. We're going to be flexible. We're going to ask families to be flexible. But you know, interesting kind of where we started tonight, one of the first slides, we believe that being back here with kids is where we want to be. And so we're going to do our best to do that and do it in a safe way.
The other thing to clarify too is that if the governor does decide at any point that schools are going to the virtual option, you know, I've heard people say, well, you know, schools aren't open. I want a refund in taxes. You know, and I know Allison's like just, you know, lining up to do that. I'm kidding. Understand our expenses have actually gone up this year because of what we need to provide to open, through PPE, through, you know, the equipment needed and everything. So it's, you know, everyone thinks that if a school building closes, everything just stops. It's not how it works. You know, it's not like we're having a third of our kids not learning at home. We still have to provide, you know, with the possibility of those kids coming back and have all the protection necessary for that in any situation and for our current staff. And, you know, as I said, it started with this. I said, the board members, we worry about things, the possibilities of things. And, you know, one of my things is like, what happens if at the elementary level, we get a bunch of kids that lose their masks and go through masks really fast. And then all of a sudden there's that mask shortage again. And we're sitting here, what are we going to be doing? And, you know, that's a possibility. It's a possibility that we may have to face at some point. You know, and the other feeling I have is for the staff. I mean, we're asking our staff to go in and, you know, they're now the frontline workers in front of all the kids. And, you know, they're not the essential workers like the doctors and medical professionals are, who have all that equipment. They have the suits, the proper masks for dealing with sick patients. We're dealing with students who may become sick, and, you know, in that situation, we do put our own employees at risk there. But, you know, we have to understand, we're not a hospital. We're not buying that expensive equipment to protect all of our people, because one, it's limited right now in across the world, particularly our country. So, you know, again, superintendent and his staff will make sure students, staff are safe. And if at any moment that they feel it's not, they will address it. So. All right, Superintendent, your report.
As you may have noticed, under Capital Project Committee, I shared most of my report already and then made a couple comments, so I think I'm good at this point.
All right.
Thanks.
Questions about the report that he just made? Anyone? Reports to the board, nothing coming in right now. Items for board discussion. This is the one piece I didn't bring up earlier. I just wanted to bring this up just for, because I know the superintendent and I have discussed this numerous times with it. One of those lingering concerns that I have about obviously working in the education field and stuff is the shortage of subs in every department, not just teachers, but support staff, bus drivers and stuff. I think this year more than ever, that shortage is going to be amplified and really felt and seen at the home level, because this is one of my concerns for bringing as many kids back at the elementary level, is that we start getting staff that are sick. And you got to remember, we're going to head into that season where it's not just COVID we have to worry about, but flu, colds, strep throat, the end of fall head lice season, that always spikes down to, towards that time right before winter. And you're gonna get staff that's gonna have to be out for them being sick, their kids being sick, so on. We're gonna be calling on subs. And I'm, right now I can tell you, there's been a sub shortage across the entire state. And that is one of my biggest worries, is that we can't find anyone. We can't really combine classes easily anymore if we can't find, someone to come in there. Or you find someone and hasn't gone through our training that we've had, for all our procedures and everything and keeping kids safe and masks and everything like that. So, this is one of my concerns with that, the plan that I just wanted you to address.
Yeah, we certainly share that concern. A few things. One, we do have a large number of subs who have already reached out, who are very interested in working, who are concerned about not working because they work many days for us. So that's a good thing that we know that supply's there. We also have a job fair. You may have seen it when you pulled in on the signs. What are the dates, Mr. Stitt?
August 6th and 7th. It's 9 a.m. to 1 p.m.
So we have a recruitment day where we're pushing for additional subs. We did it if you remember last year, didn't get to use as many of them because of the shutdown, but we certainly are looking to build up those numbers. And then when it comes to training, our plan is this: either on the day or with the exact same information that we use to train all of our other staff on all of the COVID pieces, we will use that same training and that same information for our substitutes, because that is really, really important. They need to know. We can't have it so that when they walk in here and take over a class, that their practices aren't the same as the expectations. So we're going to make sure that they're trained as well. But to the main point, the sub shortage has been out there. It is interesting to me that we've added a number of subs even for teaching on this agenda already. That means those are people who were not I looked at the names. A number of them, I don't know if all of them, were not on our list before, and they are subs for teaching. Sadly, one of the times that we see increases in many substitute positions is in downturns in the economy. Makes sense, right? So when we were really having trouble with subs before the coronavirus, at a time when our economy was strong, we had fewer subs in the pool. So will we have more as a result of that? Certainly yet to be seen, but it's absolutely a concern.
Well, even more so is the fact that, we don't know how many of those are subbing, on the sub list for other districts too. And, that's one of the other concerns is, you sub in one district, you have a sub that subs in one district in a room where a kid went home sick with COVID, or there was an adult that was there that they were exposed to COVID. Now, hey, something, I'm not going back there because of that. Let's go to another district today. But I've just been exposed to that. So, I mean, it's that particular worry. Question that I also had with bus runs. I know that sometimes when we were short subs for bus drivers, and we would combine buses, especially at the middle school level. Is that going to be that's not going to be a possibility with
Correct. I would see that we like, so let's say we get to the end of the day, people call in sick, we'd have to keep kids back and probably do another run.
Okay.
You know, with the first buses that came back is the way I would see that working. Again, depending on how the numbers work out, if they work out the way we see them now, I mean, I think we'll be in, we should be in really good shape with the number of kids on buses,
Mhm.
but, still yet to be determined.
Right. Okay. All right. Any other items for board discussion? Anything else to bring up? You guys are being awfully quiet. Rick, you've been really quiet tonight. Any old business? Any new business? All right. I think anyone public comments? You guys are all quiet. Board member comments.
Worried about me being quiet. I have to say, I want to thank Dan, all the presenters. I want to ask the presenters to thank all the staff, the teachers, all the people on these committees. I've been here 8-9 years, and I've seen wonderful presentations, but the detail of your presentations for the whole school district when it comes to busing, learning, safety, and health. And guess what? It's the first time he's ever done it. And you've done it it's always evolving. It's always changing. And the detail of your presentations and how smoothly you said it, I want to sincerely, on behalf of the board, I'm confident they feel the same way. Thank you for all the long hours and hard work you have put in on this. And I thank you sincerely.
Any other board members? I know I want to thank, your staff for putting that together. I mean, that was impressive. I mean, you had a lot, almost every single thing covered in that piece, that I think you could possibly get into, with what was given out to you. I also want to thank, our staff here. I got to tell you, I spent more time on campus now with doing the walks on the nature trail and everything than I have in the outside of the campus. Is absolutely phenomenal. Like the landscaping out front, it looks great. Unfortunately, the time that our fields, because of the less amount of rain that we had, and they look absolutely phenomenal. We can't use. I didn't get to use them. So I want to thank all the employees out there because they've done a great job. And I'm a couple weeks we'll see where we are and where things are going to be, and hopefully we can put all these plans into place. I'll put it that way, and that all the hard work was not for where it was for naught. So, all right. If there's no other comments from anyone, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed or abstaining? Motion carries. We're adjourned.